Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching second and final part of What If Naruto Saved an Autobot. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
In the midst of this chaos, the Hokage's office. As he, the third Hokage, and the other prospective Jonin teachers watched the classroom drama unfold through the Hokage's crystal orb, Kakashi Hatake laughed. Well, that's something that you don't see every day. He had actually put away his Make-out Paradise book to watch as the girls attempted to yank the Yamanaka girl away from the Uchiha heir. However, Kurenai Yuhi was appreciative that she was not given one of the future Kunoichi as a student because she was disgusted by their behavior. Asuma Sarutobi continued, looks like Naruto has just made Ino's day, but it looks like you're going to be one student short if those girls get a hold of Naruto. Kakashi. The crowd in the orb could see the girls approaching Naruto, looking menacing, but Iruka entered the room and beckoned everyone to their seats before they could attack. You are all gathered here because, of all the Jonin available, you are all the most capable of being tasked with the most important mission that any shinobi can perform, teaching the next generation of shinobi. The Hiruzen said at that moment, for the Leafs cannot have a future without these youthful rookies. Classroom at Ninja Academy. If Naruto was ever appreciative of Iruka's flawless attendance, it was today before the horde of fangirls could attack. Iruka simply walked in and ordered everyone to sit down when most of the girls disobeyed. He used his patented demonic head jutsu to threaten to expel them from the program, which instantly persuaded them to comply. Following his brief prepared speech, in which he explained that they had all taken the first step toward becoming true ninjas and so on, Iruka announced that he would read off the names of the team members and that no one would be allowed to switch teammates. Several students started to consider potential teammates as he started reading from his clipboard, but everyone's ideas were different. Sasuke pondered, why are they putting us in three-man cells? It seems like 2 members are too many. This is it, I'll have to be on Sasuke's team. I know it, Sakura thought. Oh my god, I hope I'm on Sasuke's team. Hinata glanced at the boy seated next to her and thought, I would be happy if Naruto and I were on the same team. As he anxiously scanned the classroom, Naruto thought, I'll take any team, just as long as I'm not placed with the bastard Uchiha or with any of the angry fangirls that want to kill me. Now completely recovered, Ino chanted in her mind, Sasu Ino, Sasu Ino, Sasu Ino, Sasu Ino, with hearts in her eyes. Alright, Squad 7, Sakura Haruno is the next team. Sakura's eyebrows shot up, Naruto Uzumaki. No. The pinkette screamed. Glaring at the blonde with a murderous intentness, a number of other girls were laughing at Haruno's bad luck. The idea that Naruto would have to spend the remainder of his career dealing with his enraged crush made him swallow. And Sasuke Uchiha, your Jonin instructor, will be Kakashi Hatake. Iruka was done. Naruto slammed his head against the desk in front of him and yelled, son of a bitch. The now happy Sakura yelled, oh yeah, and gave the now enraged Ino a victory sign in a triumphant grin. Shaw. Go ahead, Ino pig. I get to work with Sasuke all the time, even though you stole his first kiss. Inner Sakura yelled. Sadly, Hinata thought, SS, so that means that Naruto won't be on my team. Squad 8. Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame, your instructor is Kurenai Yuhi. Iruka went on, Squad 9 is still in service. Squad 10 shall consist of Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Shoji Akamichi. Your Jonin instructor will be Asuma Sarutobi. Ino groaned in disappointment at this. Choji simply carried on eating the chips he had brought. Shikamaru simply put his head back on the table and muttered something about unruly women. After finishing the placements, Iruka went on, you all have 1 hour before your instructor comes to pick up your team. I suggest that you use this time wisely and get to know your teammates a bit more. Hey, hold on Iruka-sensei, replied Naruto, how come you're teaming me up with that jerk Sasuke? Since last I checked, my class ranking wasn't last place finisher. That was Shikamaru, and this academy always puts the dead last and the rookie of the year on the same team, so what's the deal here? For your information, Naruto, there are several other factors that contribute to forming the Genin teams. The Hokage felt that you would reach your potential if you were paired off with Sasuke and Sakura. Iruka clarified. What? Look, don't complain to me, Naruto, you are a shinobi now, so start acting like one. Besides, the Hokage has the final say about team placements. This was not how Naruto wanted to begin his ninja career, and he simply scowled at his situation. Sasuke took this as an opportunity to once again demonstrate his dominance over the orange-clad ninja imposter. Expecting the blonde to blow up at that insult, Sasuke said arrogantly, just try not to hold this team back, loser. On the other hand, Naruto simply gave him a bored glance. Huh? I'm sorry, did you say something, Sasuke? Please speak more clearly next time, you sound like you're trying to talk with some teeth missing and a broken jaw. Calmly replied Naruto. As a result, Kiba burst out laughing uncontrollably, recalling the epic beating the arrogant Uchiha had received the day before. Sasuke just remembered that embarrassing moment and became enraged. He couldn't decide which was worse, the pain he had to go through while the medics fixed his jaw and regrew his teeth, or the humiliation he felt at how easily he was defeated by some nobody. He lied to them when they asked what had happened, claiming that he had overreached himself in his training. He was afraid of the consequences for his reputation, so he dared not tell them the truth. Sakura rushed to the Uchiha's defense and yelled, "Hey, don't say such things to Sasuke." Iruka yelled, "Enough," while utilizing his demonic head jutsu. Be sure to report back here an hour from now. Dismissed. And with that, Iruka left the classroom, while the new genin began to gather to their respective squads to either talk amongst themselves or leave the classroom to have lunch together. That brought to mind Naruto's offer to Hinata from yesterday, in relation to lunch. So, Hinata, replied Naruto, I was wondering if you would like to grab lunch with me before we have to meet our senseis? Hinata's blush reappeared, and she began to tap her index fingers nervously. However, someone else had already responded before she could. Kiba's mocking voice said, "Sorry, Romeo, but you're gonna have to get a rain check on your little date with our teammate." He and Shino then materialized behind the two. Hinata gave them a little eep when they appeared out of nowhere, but Naruto wasn't pleased with the abrupt interruption. "Oh, what? Are you two Hinata's guardians now? And if you two were, what gives you all the right to tell her what she can or can't do?" annoyed Naruto. "If you had been paying attention, Uzumaki, you would have heard Iruka-sensei telling us to use this time to get to a better understanding of our teammates, and I suggest that you do the same, so that there will be fewer problems that your instructor will have to spend time amending them," Shino responded. Naruto appeared to be about to argue, but he was halted when he sensed Hinata's hand covering one of his. "I'm sorry, Naruto, I would have loved to have lunch with you, but Shino is right. It would be best if I spent time with me new team. Is there any chance that we could reschedule?" asked Hinata. With disappointment clear in her voice, Naruto simply couldn't find it in himself to stay upset after hearing that. "Hey, don't worry about it, your teammate is right. I should try and even some things out with my team, no matter how impossible that might be. How about this upcoming Sunday, 2 days from now, would that be a good day for you?" replied Naruto. "Tht, that would be great. Naruto CC, could we meet up at the front of the Ninja Academy?" replied Hinata. With a slight genuine smile, Naruto answered, "That would be fine." Kiba made the decision to speak up because he was tired of being ignored. Kiba demanded, "Well now, if you two are done making plans for your date, can we go now, Hinata? I'm starving." Akamaru agreed with a bark. Before she followed her teammates out the doorway, Hinata turned around and said, "Good luck, Naruto." After realizing that she still had her hand on top of Naruto's, she blushed wildly as she did so. Naruto, now by himself, became aware that Sakura and Sasuke had left the classroom. Additionally, he became aware that some of the Uchiha fangirls who were not with their teammates continued to glare at him. He was aware that the girls would use this as an opportunity to get in some good hits for what had transpired earlier if he remained in the room. Naruto sighed and reluctantly started to look for his teammates. Outside, close to the academy, the blonde was fortunate to spot Sakura searching for Sasuke while strolling along a path. However, he recalled that she was among the irate group of girls who wanted to beat him for forcing Ino to kiss Sasuke. Additionally, he knew that no witnesses were present, which meant Sakura could easily beat him to within an inch of his life. However, there might still be hope for his crush. Naruto took a once-in-a-lifetime risk and went up to Sakura. Naruto began, "Hey there, Sakura, I was wondering if you wanted to have lunch with me, so that we could get to know a little bit more about each other." Sakura simply turned to give the blonde a glare. Sakura said angrily, "Why the hell would I want to get to know more about you?" "Oh, come on, Sakura, are you still mad about what happened back at the classroom? You know that it was accident, right?" said Naruto with apprehension. "There was nothing accidental about what you did, Naruto. You purposely gave Sasuke's first kiss, which was supposed to have been mine, to that Ino pig. How much did she pay you to do it, huh?" said Sakura. "What are you talking about? Ino didn't pay me to do anything. It was all accidental, I swear. I thought that it would better if Sasuke were accidentally kiss a girl instead of me. And Ino was the closest girl that was available, honest," stated Naruto. Sakura said, "Naruto, you are the most annoying person that I could ever be around." She then left a dejected Naruto behind and went in search of Sasuke. Sakura simply didn't seem to give him a chance. No matter what he did, Naruto sighed deeply and started walking to the recently opened sandwich shop, but not before someone else voiced their thoughts about the entire kiss fiasco. As she glomped onto Naruto from behind, Ino exclaimed, "You are the best, oh thank you, thank you, thank you." As Ino let go of Naruto, he asked in confusion, "What the hell are you thanking me for?" "For giving me the chance of a lifetime. It's so nice to know that there's someone else besides me that knows that Sasuke and I were meant to be together." Ino grinned dreamily. "Look, what happened back there was accidental, not intentional in fact, because of my actions, both of my teammates want to kill me," Naruto said with a deadpan voice. "Oh, I'm sure that Sakura will get over it. She just needs time to let the fact that Sasuke loves me sink in, of course. I'm sure that she'll come to accept the truth sooner if more of those moments, like the one in the classroom, were to occur more often, and I can pay you handsomely if you were to help me," she replied, only to discover that Naruto had gone missing during her plan. Alongside Naruto, "Dude, this is awful," as he took another bite of his sandwich, Naruto thought. At the moment, he was sitting on the roof of a building, eating his lunch. "It had to be that bastard Sasuke the one time I was paired with Sakura. And I'll never know how Sakura really feels about me because he's always around. Even if I ask her honestly, she will never give me a truthful response unless she is unaware that I am the one she is speaking to. All I need to do is ask her how she truly feels about me while posing as someone else, and I'm the ideal person to imitate." With Team 10 and Sasuke, as she recounted her experience with Naruto to her teammates, Ino yelled, "And then he had the nerve to just leave when I was telling him about my generous offer. After deciding it would be best to avoid saying anything that would annoy the Yamanaka girl, Shoji simply ate his rice balls and acted as though he agreed with everything the noisy girl said. All Shikamaru was doing was resisting the impulse to slam his head against the porch railing where they were meeting. The fact that Ino had made them meet in the one location that was, coincidentally, adjacent to the building where Sasuke happened to be eating lunch was already problematic. The obnoxious woman was now complaining that Naruto had not assisted her in advancing her relationship with Sasuke. "This is really annoying," Shikamaru thought. He picked the second loudest and most high-sprung kunoichi of our graduating class out of all the girls he could have chosen to replace himself. He suddenly saw Naruto moving stealthily across the rooftop, gradually making his way to Sasuke's position. Now what is he planning? The Nara asked out loud. At the moment his teammates inadvertently became interested in what he was looking at after hearing his statement. Ino thought, "So he has considered my offer after all." When she saw Naruto leap through the open window and tackle Sasuke, that thought was immediately dashed. The two were no longer in the team's line of sight, so they had no idea what would happen next. Ino yelled, "What is he doing?" Shikamaru complained. Hey, not in my ears, you troublesome woman. If you want to make yourself deaf, then do it somewhere else," Ino responded by giving him a headshake. As if nothing had happened, Sasuke emerged from the window a few seconds later. Shoji remarked, "Huh, that was quick." "Well, what did you expect, Shoji? No one can beat Sasuke," said Ino. Upon hearing this, Sasuke simply grinned. None of the three have taken notice the switch flipped off flawlessly. The original remained gagged, tied up, and hidden away. All he needed to do now was speak openly with Sakura about an urgent issue. Unnamed forested region. A very old tree stood somewhere in the middle of the forest with a height of roughly 50 feet. It was one of the biggest trees in the whole forest. It was there when the Leaf Village was formed and had been there for hundreds of years. However, in contrast to the other trees in the vicinity, there was something strange about that particular tree. There was a large knothole that caused a large depression in the tree about halfway up. A mini-con panel, with only one of its 5 edges exposed to the outside world, was situated in the middle of that large depression. The tree had been young when it first appeared. Over time, as the tree's growth progressed, the panel was increasingly hidden by the tree. Life in the wilderness went on as if nothing had happened, even with the panel present until, that is, the panel that had lain dormant for hundreds of years suddenly glowed bright green before extinguishing itself once more. Spitfire is back. Spitfire was just in the middle of a television-edited film that was rife with commercials. The small jetbot was annoyed by the frequent interruptions, despite the fact that the movie was good. If they're only going to break up a movie with these dumb commercials, what's the point of watching it on TV? He pondered. Spitfire sensed an odd, massive energy signature. All of a sudden Naruto would have realized right away that it wasn't his chakra signature. As soon as he began his journey home, he had not felt this energy signature in millions of years, but it was somewhat like the chakra signature of a ninja. He made an effort to refute it, but the energy signature could only have come from. Spitfire uttered the words, "An awakening mini-con panel," before hurriedly grabbing his coat and hat from the closet and fleeing the apartment through an open window. Before it was too late, he needed to locate Naruto. Naruto is back. Well, I suppose my plan might be deemed partially successful. Even so, I had to pretend to be Sasuke in order to discover that Sakura truly couldn't stand me as he walked slowly back to the academy, Naruto thought angrily, and just when she was about to kiss Sasuke, I get the runs and have to run to the nearest toilet. I then run into Sasuke before I can get back together with Sakura for a kiss. He undoubtedly told Sakura the truth. I believed I had tied those ropes securely enough. A certain Pinkette was reflecting on her most recent encounter with Sasuke as he strolled along the path leading to the academy. She initially thought they could continue where they had left off, so she was thrilled he had returned. She would then be able to enjoy the satisfaction of finally gaining Sasuke's affection. You can only imagine how disappointed she was when he insisted on knowing Naruto's location. Sakura tried her typical bash Naruto tactic, saying that he had been raised badly because he had no parents, that this had made him selfish, and that he was fortunate not to have to endure his parents' nagging, in an attempt to keep her crush's attention on herself. Sasuke verbally attacked her, claiming that being reprimanded by your parents was nothing compared to spending your entire life alone, indicating that she had said the wrong thing. Sasuke simply replied that she made him ill. When Sakura questioned what he meant by that her crush would ever say something so hurtful to her, shocked and saddened Sakura. Why would Sasuke claim that she made him ill when she had always made sure to be kind and amiable to him? I wonder if Naruto shares Sasuke's sentiments. However, I suppose he has every right to do so, Sakura thought. Perhaps I could start treating him more kindly. She noticed Naruto approaching her at that precise moment, just as she was about to say something hurtful to him. She recalled her new decision. She therefore had to exert a great deal of effort and self-control to get a smile that was at least somewhat amicable. "Hey, Naruto," she said, "how about we walk back to the academy together?" Naruto was taken aback. Sakura had immediately turned him down the last time he asked her to spend time with him, so why now would she want to do so again? All of this seemed too good to be true. Otherwise, Sakura might have been Sasuke, waiting to attack him. However, he saw something out of the corner of his eye, a disguised Spitfire. Before he could yell back an answer, on the paved path, he was hiding behind a tree a few feet away from Naruto's position and making frantic motions for him to approach. Naruto was extremely perplexed by this, since he and Spitfire had agreed that the Cybertronian would remain hidden in his apartment as long as he was allowed to occasionally come out. Therefore, there must have been an emergency for the small robot to be outside by himself. To Sakura's ire, Naruto ran towards the tree, ignoring Sakura for the moment. "Spitfire, what are you doing here? You know that you have to keep a low profile," murmured Naruto. The Mini-Con whispered back, "Naruto, I need your help. I think that there's another Mini-Con hidden in this village." "What, are you sure?" With an urgent, "Yes, now come on," Spitfire took Naruto's hand and started dragging him through the forest. Naruto exclaimed, hey, where are you taking me?" Spitfire responded, "To the panel's location. We have to get there before anyone else does," and proceeded in that direction. "Do you even know where it is?" "Yes, just trust me on this." Naruto managed to break free from the Mini-Con's hold, causing the two to halt. "But what about my team? We're supposed to be meeting our sensei in 5 minutes, and I want to make a good first impression," he said. "I know, and I'm sorry, but you know that I would never ask of something this big unless it was important. Please, Naruto, I really need your help." Spitfire begged for assistance. Naruto fell silent in order to join his teammates in waiting for their sensei. He wanted to simply tell the Mini-Con to go home. He felt that things could only get worse as the day went on, but then he recalled that he was already at odds with them. Aside from that, he owed Spitfire one for shattering Sasuke's jaw after the jerk insulted him, and compared to his two new allies, he had been more like a friend. Naruto turned back to his friend and sighed deeply. "All right then, lead the way." Moonbase of Decepticon, Transwarp Gate Center. It took place once more. The computer detected the energy signature of an activating Mini-Con panel just as it had previously, and it was very difficult to lock onto it, just like the last time. Come on, lock on already." A desperate Demolisher thought. He had been working on the base's main computer for the last 2 days, updating the software, updating the sensory programs, and doing anything else that could improve the computer's performance. His dreams were still plagued by the fallout from his failure. The Decepticon pleaded, "Please don't lose this Mini-Con. Megatron will have me slagged if I don't." The computer gave a sharp beep beep to indicate that the Mini-Con's location had been locked on after what felt like hours. The computer heard Demolisher say, "Oh, thank you, Megatron, sir, I've got it. I've got the location of the new Mini-Con, sir." When the Decepticon leader approached his subordinate, he yelled, "Silence, you simpleton. You only need to report your findings once, you oaf, and for your sake, you had better have a firm lock on those coordinates." Looking at the screen, he realized that Demolisher was right after all. Anyone walking by could see the Mini-Con's coordinates. "Ah, So you can follow the simplest of orders. At least I know that you're not completely incompetent now. Bring the location of the latest mini-con up on the monitor. I want to see exactly where this panel is. Demolisher obeyed his commander without hesitation. The image of the village appeared on the screen after the tank bot entered a few commands on the computer's keyboard. But when Megatron had the computer perform a recon scan of the human civilizations that existed on Earth, he discovered that this village was unlike any other human village he had ever seen. The village's general layout was comparable to that of villages in Japan, but it lacked sophisticated transportation and technological advancements, and trees were all over the place. Megatron would have concluded that it had a steampunk design if it had been explained in human terms. Megatron questioned perilously, "Demolisher, are you sure that this is the correct location?" "Why yes, sir, Megatron," Demolisher stumbled. "The upgrades that I've installed on the computer have doubled the main sensor's scanning power. Normally, the computer should be able to locate any mini-con on this planet, yet for some reason, this location has managed to elude our sensors. In fact, sir, I believe that this is the same location of that disappearing mini-con from 2 solar cycles ago." You don't say." Demolisher, locate the exact position of the new mini-con. When Demolisher complied once more, the steampunk village's appearance shifted to that of a massive tree in the middle of the forest. The glowing edge of a mini-con panel was then visible as the screen zoomed in on the big knothole in the center of the tree. Megatron walked to the warp pedestal and said, "Ah, yes, there it is. Demolisher, open a warp gate to that exact position. I'm going to retrieve that mini-con myself." "But Megatron, sir, won't you need backup? What if the Autobots arrive?" "You idiot, must I explain everything to you? If it has taken us this much trouble just to locate this mini-con, then the Autobots are experiencing the same problems, if not more severe ones, with their tracking equipment. And as for me, I know that I'm far more than capable of retrieving a mini-con from a steampunk village. Now open the warp gate." Demolisher replied, "Why yes sir, Megatron," and immediately began working on it. Returning with Spitfire and Naruto after they arrived at the mini-con site, Spitfire, who had removed his coat and hat, called out from below, "Are you there yet, Naruto?" As Naruto slowly made his way up the tree toward the enormous knothole, he said, "Don't rush me here. I'm almost there." Naturally, if there were some branches nearby, this process would proceed much more quickly. Of all the possible hiding spots, a mini-con had to be in the middle of one of the forest's tallest frickin' trees. A location that Spitfire is too afraid to approach. He thought he made his way slowly but steadily to the middle of the knothole, where the mini-con is deeply embedded. As he attempted to remove it, Naruto called out, "Okay, Spitfire, I found it. It's lodged in deep into the tree." He said, "Man, it's really in there." At the moment, he was trying to free the panel with both hands while standing on 2 kunai knives that were set into the bark of the tree as platforms. He only needed to lose his footing to lose his balance and fall to the ground. The storage panel suddenly jerked forward, almost knocking him down. Fortunately, Naruto's descent was effectively stopped by the panel that was still wedged into the tree. Naruto attempted to come up with another method of removing the panel. After he had regained his equilibrium, he was unable to pry the object from the tree because he was not carrying any extra kunai. He had no idea how to make shadow clones stand on a tree without the support of branches or platforms, so that was out of the question. "What if I gave this thing a little tug?" Naruto thought. The blonde genin made the decision to try it since there was no other option. Naruto pulled as hard as he could. With a powerful yank, the mini-con began to slowly climb out of the tree, inch by inch, as if it would soon emerge as though it were lubricated with oil. The panel abruptly slipped out. Naruto actually fell backwards off the kunai platforms because he was unprepared for this unexpected movement from the storage panel and did not have time to regain his balance. With quick thinking, Naruto was able to turn his body and managed to grab one of the kunai that were carved into the tree, preventing his fall. Having his arm abruptly stop his entire body from falling had hurt, but it was better than dying by falling. Thankfully, he managed to keep the mini-con in his grasp. "Naruto, are you alright?" a terrified Spitfire yelled. Naruto called, Yeah, I'm fine." Grabbing the remaining kunai with his other hand, he started to use them to slowly descend the tree while he tucked the metallic pentagon inside his jacket. Naruto removed the panel and set it on the ground after he was back on solid ground. After that, Spitfire approached the panel and knelt down to examine it more closely. Naruto quickly imitated his companion. Naruto questioned, "Is this the mini-con that you sensed, Spitfire?" Spitfire answered, "Yes, this is definitely the one. I had no idea that there was another one in this village." "So, then what's the problem? Why isn't a mini-con waking up?" "Well, mini-cons usually awaken whenever they feel they're ready, or when they decide that the time is right. Of course, there have been some instances in which an electrical shock was used to awaken them, like some sort of extreme alarm clock, but that's not what got me worried." Staring with concern, Naruto asked, "Then what's the problem?" Both of them were so absorbed in the mini-con that they failed to notice the figure that slid into existence, one bar at a time, or the warp gate that had opened from behind them. If the two of us manage to appear here, then there's a possibility that several more of my kind are scattered around this world, and the technology needed to track them doesn't exist in this plane. Naruto said, "I see," unsure of how to react to this new situation. Well, maybe the old man can think up of something, but for now, what do we do with this panel now that we've got it free? A strange voice that seemed to be coming from behind them yelled, "You'll give it to me." Naruto turned around and saw something he had assumed was only seen in his dreams. Something that looked like a giant robot stood behind them, arms crossed in front of its chest. However, it did not resemble any robot he had ever seen. The creature had claw-like hands, purple upper thighs, upper arms, and shoulders, and green feet with gray claw-like toes at the ends. Its head, forearms, and enormous gray torso were all adorned with spitfire-like orange eyes. However, there was something evil and sadistic about these eyes. The robot also had two large green-framed objects on its shoulders that suspiciously resembled treadmills, a large green shield with a long silver barrel protruding on the right side on its back, and what appeared to be a claw on top of its head. All things considered, the figure appeared incredibly strong and menacing. "What the hell?" exclaimed Naruto, staring at the giant who had ambushed both himself and Spitfire. But then he saw the long purple insignia on the shoulders and in the middle of the chest. Then, with uncontrollable shaking, he felt someone grab hold of him from behind. He turned to face it and saw that it was none other than Spitfire, who, judging by his trembling, looked utterly terrified. Naruto asked softly, keeping his gaze fixed on the newcomer, "Spitfire, what is it? What's wrong?" When Spitfire stammered, No, it can't be him, not here, not now." Naruto, who was now becoming concerned, said, "Spitfire, what are you talking about? Who is this guy?" Megatron," Spitfire muttered. "Who? Megatron. Academy of Ninjas. Why does the Hokage continue to harm me like this?" As he walked to the classroom to pick up his new charges, Kakashi sighed. Even though he was already almost 3 hours late, he wasn't particularly irritated. "I would have assumed that the old man would have realized that I'm not interested in becoming a Jonin sensei after all of the teams have failed. Oh well, I might as well finish this now." When he opened the classroom door, he saw a gloomy young boy with his hands clasped together in front of his face. A girl with bubblegum pink hair was standing right next to him, chatting animatedly with the boy in an effort to strike up a conversation. However, the boy hardly responded to any of the girl's questions, suggesting that he wanted to be left alone. Upon searching the classroom for his third charge, Kakashi discovered that he was nowhere to be found. The two graduates turned to watch the Jonin clear his throat. "Is this all there is for Squad 7? Cuz, it looks like we are missing someone. Do any of you happen to know where our third member is?" Kakashi hesitated. "That idiot. I saw him heading back to Academy, and offered to walk back with him. The jerk had the nerve to run off somewhere without so much as saying a word to me," said Sakura with rage. Sasuke simply uttered his signature, HN, leaving his thoughts on the subject up for debate. At this new information, Kakashi simply arched an eyebrow. The whiskered boy should have been here because he had seen Naruto at the team placement meeting through the Hokage's crystal ball. Kakashi thought, "I wonder where that little prankster is." With Spitfire and Naruto with his eyes still fixed on the giant that had appeared directly behind him without making a sound, Naruto asked, What did you say?" Behind him, Spitfire remained, shaky and doing his best to blend in as much as possible. Megatron said bluntly, "You heard me the first time, human. That mini-con panel on the ground is mine, and I expect you to return it to me immediately." He was already irritated that a local had discovered the panel before him, but he was trying his hardest not to confront this lower life form about it. Suddenly, however, the great Decepticon's gaze was drawn to something behind the human. Upon closer inspection, he was startled to discover a reactivated mini-con concealed directly behind the person in front of the panel. What? An already awakened mini-con? However, how is that even possible? Is it possible that Demolisher lost this mini-con a while back? As Megatron tried to figure out how to get back with both mini-cons in his possession, he thought, if it is, then this changes everything. He swiftly adjusted his strategy in the hopes of avoiding a situation akin to his previous experience with people. "Well now, aren't you a clever little boy? Not only did you find that panel, but you've already found an activated one. You really are an intelligent human being. The other 3 humans I've encountered only managed to find one for each of them, but you've managed to find those 2 all by yourself. Now, why don't you be a good little human, and hand them both over to me?" said Megatron in a falsely reassuring voice. One person would accept his scheme. It was not going to be that simple for the Decepticon commander, unfortunately. Naruto realized right away that the giant in front of him was plotting. Contrary to popular belief, he had a keen sense of people and knew right away that this, Megatron, was bad news. Additionally, Spitfire's complete fear of him and his rapid mood swings had demonstrated that his suspicion might have been correct. However, his lack of knowledge about Spitfire's life meant that his roommate might very well be a wanted criminal, and if that were the case, he should just give Spitfire to the threatening mech. However, Naruto chose to comply with Megatron's plan in the hopes of extracting additional information from him. Trying not to lose his cool, Naruto asked, "Why do you want these minicons anyway? I mean, they're so much smaller than you. What use could you possibly have for them? And who are you anyway?" The snarl threatened to erupt, but Megatron had to bite it back. He quickly realized that his ruse would not work as well as he had hoped. "I hoped a few lies wouldn't be enough to handle it. Well, for starters, I am known as Megatron, and as for the little robot behind you, well, you see, he's my child. Yes, you see, we had an argument a long time ago and he ended up running away from home. With his sleeping brother. I've been searching for them both for years, and for a while I had thought that I'd never see them again, but as luck would have it, I stumbled upon your location by accident. You have no idea how relieved I am to know that the both of them are safe." Megatron spoke using his vocal processor. Naruto was not deceived by that brief tale. He realized right away that something was amiss. "Is that so? Then, could you perhaps tell me what your child's name is?" replied Naruto. What did you just say?" Megatron asked, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected inquiry. "Well, if the little guy behind me is indeed your child, then could you please tell me what his name is? Or what are few of his likes and dislikes? Or perhaps what's his greatest fear?" Well, Naruto snatched up Minicon from the ground and slowly backed away from the giant, yelling, "Cut the crap already. I may not be the best student in the academy, but I'm not completely stupid. I know for a fact that you're anything but Spitfire's father. I don't know who you are, or why you want these Minicons so badly, but there is no way that I'm just going to hand them over to you." Megatron simply frowned. He disliked it when his plans didn't work out. He muttered, Fine then, we'll go with plan B then," and reached for his tank turret fusion cannon. Aiming the barrel at Naruto with the sickeningly sweet charm turned to evil, he commanded, "Give me the Minicons right now, or suffer my wrath." Spitfire's shaking only got worse as Naruto made every effort to hide his fear. "Wow, that's a huge water pipe you have there," Naruto growled. "Are you going to water us or what?" Zapow! Blam! A loud blast came from the cannon, and a big bright purple shell struck the ground a few yards to the left of the group, causing a huge explosion that instantly severed the blonde's head. Naruto was speechless and just stared in shock at the blast's landing spot, and when the smoke cleared, he saw a huge crater that was 10 feet deep and 15 feet in diameter. Megatron yelled, drawing Naruto and Spitfire's focus back to him and the smoking barrel of his cannon. "That was your first and only warning, human. I trust that it won't be necessary for me to repeat myself." With a ruthless grin affixed to his icy metal face and intense orange eyes, he uttered those words. Tower of Hokage. What the devil? The Hokage immediately summoned the Anbu that were stationed outside his office. He heard the explosion and felt the tremor of the aftershock, Hiruzen said, jumping out of his seat and running to a window facing the northwest section of the village, a few miles behind the Inuzuka clan compound. To his surprise and horror, he saw smoke rising from a location that was extremely close to the defensive walls that surrounded the village, possibly even on the other side. Remember to recruit all of the graduating Genin team's Jonin senseis to join Anbu Squadron 1 as soon as they report in. Get the squadron mobilized and ask them to look into the cause of the explosion. Where the devil was that explosion and what caused it? I want to know, he gave the order. Hello, Hokage-sama. After they disappeared in a shushin, Hiruzen went straight back to his desk and attempted to use his crystal ball to locate the site of the explosion, but in the midst of the chaos, he missed a tiny, inky-like mouse scuttling through a crack in the hardwood floor. Naruto is back. Well, are you dumb and deaf, human? Before I get really upset, give me the mini-cons if you want to survive. As he prepared his cannon for another shot, Megatron yelled. Naruto knew that he needed to move quickly because he could be killed in an instant, but what could a greenhorn genin like him do against something like Megatron? Unwilling to surrender without a fight, Naruto finally broke the silence with a hand gesture resembling a cross. Well, let me consider that. How is this your response? Multiple shadow clone jutsu. Ninja art. Change. Megatron was in for a big shock as the massive cloud of smoke that quickly covered the entire area around him dissipated. What the? Megatron boomed as he noticed that the mini-con was already activated around him and that there were hundreds of copies of the person holding the panel. He immediately turned on his internal scanners in an attempt to locate the originals because he had previously dealt with complex illusion holograms, but to his surprise, they were unable to penetrate the illusion and claimed that all of the duplicates were real. Megatron thought, how is this possible? My scanners can't tell which of these blasted things are illusions, and which are the real ones. In addition, the organic gave off energy readings that resembled those of a mini-con, and I know that humans can't normally accomplish such feats. Could this be a result of prolonged contact with the mini-con that human found? You're in for another surprise if you believe that I'm just going to give you these mini-cons. All of the Narutos yelled, you must first catch all of us. Then the Narutos and Spitfires dispersed, and Megatron snarled as he aimed his cannon to the left at a group of clones that were running away. His targeting systems weren't malfunctioning, but his internal scanners were, so he fired without hesitation at the humans and mini-cons, causing them to explode in multiple clouds of smoke. The Decepticon didn't stop to think about this new development, so he fired repeatedly until almost all of the copies were gone, leaving only the group of 6, 3 humans and 3 mini-cons. Heading north, Megatron snarled as he chased after them, determined to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. Despite the fact that Spitfire, Naruto, and their duplicates were running as fast as they could in an attempt to escape the Metal Giant of Death, Spitfire was unable to stop thinking about one thing. Why did you do that, Naruto? He was running right next to him when he asked. It's easy. The clones served only as a distraction to allow us to get away, and since the shadow clones have their own supply of chakra that they can use on their own, it makes perfect sense to have some of them use the transformation jutsu, Naruto remarked as though they were strolling through a park. That's what I meant. No, why did you put your life in danger to keep that mini-con and me safe in your arms? Had you simply handed the panel and me over to Megatron, he would have simply left you alone. Why you would put yourself in such danger is beyond me. After a brief period of silence, Naruto responded, why would I need a reason to help out a friend? In defiance of his better judgment, Naruto turned around to see how far away they were from Megatron. To his horror, he saw that the giant robot was pursuing him, his feet making loud banging noises every time they made contact with the ground, and his cannon was firing shot after shot at the group, each one getting closer to their position. Suddenly, a laser bolt flew right past Naruto's face and hit the ground ahead of them. Another explosion followed, leaving yet another smoldering crater in the ground. You little vermin, get back here, Megatron growled, and eventually the Decepticon got tired of running after his victim. Change. Megatron's form twisted and turned until it resembled a futuristic military tank, with the main turret cannon blasting away. The shadow clones behind Naruto and Spitfire were destroyed with little resistance as the tank raced towards them, tearing up with its powerful treadmills. In response, Naruto created 30 more shadow clones, half of which he disguised as Spitfire. He then had half of them run ahead with him and Spitfire, while the other half stayed behind them. Finally, he grabbed Spitfire's hand, which the clones imitated, before he and the clones started running around sporadically, zigzagging left to right, speeding up, slowing down, and zigzagging left to right, doing anything to prevent Megatron from hitting the real targets. This only served to enrage the giant robot even more. This is becoming boring. Powerlink, Leader 1. Megatron gave the order, and a small hatch on his gun turret opened, allowing a small white and turquoise mini-con to leap out. This mini-con was about the size of Spitfire, but it had a yellow visor covering its optics instead of 2 eyes and a mouth, as well as an immobile mouthguard. As soon as it was out in the open, it changed into a small 4-wheeled dune buggy with 2 laser cannons mounted on its back. The mini-con then attached itself to a connector port on the far right of the turret, and a second later, 2 more laser cannons on the left side of the turret folded outwards, increasing the turret's number of laser bolts from 1 to 5. This only made matters worse for the fugitive entourage. I don't think so. Leader 1 is already in the grasp of that slagger. As the remaining clones frantically attempted to avoid the oncoming bullets, 14 of them were destroyed, and Spitfire yelled in shock at the intense barrage. What? Hold on, who is Leader 1? But before he could respond, another of Megatron's bullets flew past, almost tearing off his nose. Knowing that this was no time to play 20 questions, Naruto focused on the front of him, but he was upset to see that they were getting close to the village's massive defensive wall. As he frantically tried to think of a way out, Naruto thought, crap, I nearly forgot that damn wall was there. If I don't think of something, we're both gonna be dead meat. They were almost at the wall, and it appeared that Megatron had them trapped. Get a partner and scatter, everyone, ordered Naruto, before the entire group split up and ran off in different directions. Megatron did not expect such a tactic from his prey, and stopped so that he could try and get an accurate lock on one of the retreating figures. Yet, he didn't know which one to strike down first, as his scanners still couldn't tell which ones were the real ones. And with every passing second, he knew that his quarries were getting further and further away, which in turn made him even more enraged. The very thought of a half-evolved ape getting the better of him, a supreme killing machine, was too humiliating for him to bear. So with a roar of exasperation, Megatron began to turn his turret around and around at a rapid pace, whilst firing at everything that passed in front of his guns. The devastation was horrific. Everything was torn apart by the vicious onslaught. Trees were ripped to pieces, the ground was pitted with large craters. The clones never stood a chance against the brutal attack, having deemed that his attack had gone on long enough. Megatron ceased firing and stopped his turret to survey his handiwork. He was quite impressed with what he saw. Nothing seemed to have escaped unscathed. Even the large wall that served to keep enemies out of the village had a huge gaping hole in it. He was about to look away, when he suddenly saw both Naruto and Spitfire escape through the wall's new hole, completely unharmed. At first, Megatron couldn't believe what he had just saw with his own optical sensors. No mere organic could have survived his firepower, they would have been reduced to charred scraps of flesh. But then, he noticed something a few inches in front of the wall's hole. Zooming in on that location, Megatron was shocked to see a hole that was big enough to provide cover for 2 preteen humans, or 1 preteen and a mini-con. Instantly, the shock turned into rage, pure, unmitigated anger. He had been so focused on destroying the distractions, that his attention was scattered all over the place. And that blasted human had used that to his advantage, no doubt using those blasted copies of himself to dig the hole, and then used it to take cover from the attack. The very thought of being deceived yet again by that worthless human made Megatron experience anger that he hadn't experienced in a long time now. More than ever, he wanted to destroy that interloper, to squish it like an insecticon, to reduce it to a bloody and unrecognizable carcass. You are an organic filthy. Your worthless body will be reduced to ash by me. I will break you up, limb by limb. Megatron bellowed, then resumed his chase. In the meantime, with Squad 9, hey, Sensei. Hey Lee. Hey, Sensei. Hey Lee. Damn it. What causes this to occur every time? Is it too much to ask for a team meeting without these unnecessary dramatizations between Sensei and Lee? A girl with brown hair tied up in 2 buns and dressed in green shinobi pants and a pink Chinese-style blouse asked. A boy with long black hair tied up by the lower part of his hair and pearl-white, pupilless eyes that indicated he was from the Hyuga clan said, that in itself would be defying fate. He had turbine bandages wrapped around his right arm and leg and wore some kind of headgear underneath his black headband, with the chin straps loose and hanging on the sides of his head. The now identified Tenten responded, that sounded almost like a joke, Neji. When she didn't hear back from him, she turned back to watching her other teammate embrace their sensei. They were both dressed alike, with the exception of Guy Sensei's height and the fact that he was wearing his Jonin vest unzipped over his own spandex. They both wore a green full-body spandex suit with orange leg warmers, their headbands serving as belts, thick bushy eyebrows, and a bowl-cut hairstyle. But still, a little change from the ordinary routine would be welcomed, Tenten replied. I mean, it's not like the world will end if something different happens every now and then. Zapow. Blam. Zapow. Blam. What on earth was that? The new disturbances were strong enough to pull the 2 spandex wearers out of each other's embrace and back to reality. Tenten screamed as she heard the explosions and felt the slight tremors that were produced on the ground. Maybe someone has overdone their training at such a young age, Guy Sensei. Rock Lee, who might have passed for Mighty Guy's son, inquired. The overuse of the word, youth, had already worn Neji's patience thin. Lee, we are the only ones that are registered to use this training ground. Tenten added, and besides, those explosions don't sound like it was caused by any explosive tag that I know of. Soon after, more explosions occurred, each one getting closer to their location until the final one sounded a few yards behind them. The dense tree foliage obscured the source of the blasts, but they were able to detect a few chakra signatures approaching. What do you see, Neji? Guy demanded in response. Neji activated his Byakugan and immediately trained his sight through the dense trees in front of the group, causing his eyebrows to shoot up to his headband. He was surprised to see so many of what he thought were disguised shadow clones acting in this way, as well as the vehicle that was pursuing them. The Hyuga watched as the clones dispersed and the vehicle came to a halt. Then he noticed the top section with the barrels begin to spin around at an increasing pace, along with some sort of energy surge towards the barrel. It was then that he and his team heard the angry roar, and he realized what was about to happen. Now, everyone, get down, Neji yelled, before he dropped the ground on his belly. His teammates swiftly followed suit, just before the explosions became more frequent and violent and closer to their position. No one dared to move, but Neji continued to watch as the clones and everything else around them were destroyed with little resistance until a boy with blue eyes and blonde hair, followed by a man with metal wings, came out of the trees and attempted to run, but stumbled and fell to the ground. Tenten saw this and was about to try to assist the two when a purple streak of light flew out of the foliage and collided on the ground they were standing on, engulfing them completely in a massive explosion. Tenten stared at the smoking crater where two people had once been, as if she were in a trance, and for the first time she had seen a death so gory. Sure, she knew that a shinobi had a dangerous life, and that they would always be in danger of dying in the line of duty, but she never expected to see someone die in such a horrible way. The explosions ended as quickly as they had begun, leaving Squad 9 with a ringing noise in their ears from the attack. Tenten! Neji yelled, jolting the girl back to the present. WHWHWA? Was the most she could do at the time? Those were merely shadow clones, I said when they were struck by that attack. I watched them explode into smoke with my Byakugan, Neji said. However, what might have led to such unyouthful devastation? Rock Lee inquired. I've never seen anything like it, Neji said, his Byakugan eyes never leaving the big, odd car. I don't know exactly, however, I would characterize it as resembling a big, movable cannon. What? Is there even such a thing? Tenten inquired. You are an organic filthy. Your worthless body will be reduced to ash by me. I will break you up, limb by limb. Squad Guy heard the yell coming from deep within the smoldering foliage. I believe that we ought to be more worried about who that car is pursuing. He was probably the caster of those shadow clones. In my opinion, it's likely that the person will be killed if we don't step in, Neji said. Neji, you can't be serious. How could one Jonin and 3 Genin possibly defeat a mobile cannon? Of sorts. Tenten, still quite shaken by the whole ordeal, said, we should warn the Hokage and let him handle this threat. However, what about the individual that the weapon is viciously pursuing? As Leaf Village shinobi, we always take pride in our ability to work as a team and take care of our teammates, Lee retorted. Letting that person be at the mercy of that death machine would be very unyouthful. Lee, you spoke like a real shinobi, Guy remarked. You have the flame of youth burning brightly within you, my pupil, but your teammates do make good points. The full extent of this unidentified threat's capabilities is unknown to us. As a result, we will pursue this intruder until a safe way to remove its target presents itself, and we will run 100 laps around the village on our hands if we are unable to complete this easy task. Yosh. And if we cannot accomplish that, then we shall run 200 laps around the village while carrying boulders on our backs, said Rock Lee. Can we please cut this nonsense out already? We're wasting time just standing here, Tenten said. Mighty Guy said, right Squad 9, move out. The 4 shinobi wasted no more time and bounded off in the direction of the last known location of the mobile cannon. In the meantime, with Squad 8, Kiba Inuzuka said, come on. Why can't we come along? BB but Kiba. Those explosions sounded really close, Hinata replied. And what about that voice we just heard? Don't tell me that's what got you all riled up, Hinata. It was probably just some moron fooling around with explosive tags or something. Shino, who was stoic, said, I sincerely doubt that, Kiba, as I have never heard a shinobi refer to someone else as a filthy organic. Not to mention those threats indicate that whoever voiced them intends to inflict serious harm to someone. Alright, so we're possibly facing an escaped mental patient who is extremely violent. I think that 4 ninja can easily take him down before he carries out those threats, replied Kiba. Akamaru communicated his position to his partner with a pleasant bark. This isn't up for debate, Kiba, Kurenai declared firmly. Despite how prepared you think you are for normal shinobi duties, you and your teammates are just academy graduates that have yet to complete their final initiation test. This is a situation that requires a shinobi that has years of experience under their belt, something that neither of you have at the moment. Then let this be our initiation test. How can we get any experience if we are always rushed off to the shelters? We can handle this, Sensei. It's what we've been training for our entire lives, replied Kiba. I agree with Kiba. Kurenai sensei, it would be the most logical plan to have backup in these sorts of situations. And by letting us accompany you, you will be able to see firsthand how we would fare in a combat situation, said Shino. Kurenai had been expecting him to obey her orders without question, so his response had taken her by surprise. The Kunoichi member of her potential genin team caught her attention. She was aware of Hinata's low self-esteem because she had personally witnessed her father's brutal treatment of her. She asked Hinata to be one of her students for this reason. Among others, she was also aware that putting Hinata in a situation for which she was unprepared would totally undermine her self-esteem. Hinata began, as her stutter began to reappear. I agree with Kiba AA and Shino. Why you're going to need BB backup. Kurenai began. Listen, Hinata, don't feel like you. I'm not saying this because I feel like I'm pressured to. Hinata exclaimed. Kurenai stared into Hinata's eyes, looking for any indication that she didn't want to carry out any of this, but she remained silent. I want to prove that I am a capable shinobi not just to my teammates, or to you, but to my father and my entire clan. Instead of the typical timidity she had grown used to, she was shocked to see sheer determination. A male voice said, your new students are just bursting with the fires of youth, Kurenai. The young Jonin suppressed a moan because, without even looking back, she knew who was behind her. Although his demeanor tended to try one's patience, she didn't think he was a bad guy. Kurenai looked at the Jonin wearing spandex and said, Mighty guy, what brings you here? However, when she saw Neji Hyuga giving Hinata a covert frown, she mentally grimaced because she hadn't expected to see his genin team with him. Mighty Guy described what he and his team had seen, saying, my youthful team and I are on a reconnaissance, and possibly a rescue mission. So you think that someone was being targeted by this mobile cannon? Do you have any idea who the target is? To be truthful, I have never seen this young man before, replied Guy, but I do remember that he had bright blonde hair, and was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit. Hinata let out a little, and Naruto, before realizing how unprofessional and pitiful she sounded in front of Neji. Seriously, Naruto? Trust the dead last to get into a situation like this. He probably tried to pull a prank on someone he shouldn't have, but hey, I'm sure it's nothing we three can handle, replied Kiba. He heard his dog bark in agreement. Hey, it looks like the Academy's graduation standards have declined over the past year, seeing as they somehow saw fit to allow you lot to pass, Neji grumbled. What was that, punk? Just who do you think you are, looking down on us? Kiba growled. I should be asking you the exact same thing, rookie. You think that just because you graduated from the academy, that you are invincible? That you are immediately an expert shinobi? If so, then it's clear that the academy no longer determines whether a student should be allowed to graduate by skill and intellect alone. But I guess it also helps if you happen to be an heir or heiress of major shinobi clan, replied Neji, and then turned to look at Hinata. Though Hinata made every effort to avoid being intimidated by her cousin, she couldn't help but look away from Neji. In contrast, Kiba was actually growling as he struggled to control the roiling anger inside of him. He always hated arrogant punks that treated everyone around them like they were mere commoners. He had to deal with Sasuke in his class for crying out loud, except for the tiny crease in his brow and the faint buzzing sound coming from him. Shino did not appear to react to Neji's jab. Furthermore, have you even stopped to actually think about the situation your former classmate is in before you assure yourself that you can remedy it? This Naruto is currently being pursued by massive mobile weapon that had just appeared out of nowhere, undetected by anyone, and has the firepower to completely annihilate almost anything in its path. Do you actually have a plan to stop that abomination, or will you succumb to the fate of being another figure in the statistics for the early death rate for genins? And as for your friend, considering his situation, I'd say that his fate has already been sealed, the older Hyuga sighed. Tenten yelled, Neji, you didn't need to be so harsh like that. Instead then, with a slightly gentler expression than Neji's, she turned to the three of them. But he does have point. This is like nothing that was taught in the academy. Even we weren't thrown into situations like this right after our graduation. You have to work your way up by doing training and easy missions first, before you take on the harder jobs. While you are correct in your assumption, I believe that it would be more beneficial if we got a first-hand experience of what to expect as new members of the Shinobi Corps, replied Shino. Or, it could have do more harm than good. Each person reacts differently to these sorts of experiences. Hey, we are more than capable of handling any situation your team deals with, Kiba replied. In an attempt to defuse the situation before it got out of hand, Lee said, look, this is not the place nor time for this discussion. My comrades, every minute we waste, the more time that unyouthful weapon has to capture its unfortunate target. My pupil is correct, this is not the time or place to be arguing amongst ourselves. Guy responded. We must hurry if we are to save poor Naruto. Which is why my team and I will assist you in any way we can, Guy, added Kurenai, before Guy started listing all of the ridiculous tasks he would do if he failed. Kiba, thrilled to finally witness some genuine action, yelled, what? You're serious, sensei? However, the emotion was short-lived because his sensei gave him the same look he had seen whenever his mother gave a serious lecture. Do not treat this as a field trip. Kiba, I am only allowing you and your teammates to come along so that you all can get a strong understanding of what's to be expected of you three. But let me make this perfectly clear to all of you. I am in charge, and I expect that my commands are followed to the letter. You are not to make a move unless I tell you to. If tell you to take cover, you take cover. If I tell to retreat, you retreat, and if any you disobeys just one of my orders, or decides to be the hero, you will be stripped of your headbands and kicked out of the shinobi corps. Do I make myself clear? The red-eyed Jonin said in a dead serious tone. The young Inuzuka's confidence faltered a little under his sensei's solemn demeanor. She was more severe than he had anticipated. He reasoned, however, that it was the only way to get stronger ultimately. As they say, no pain, no gain. Kiba calmly said, I understand, Kurenai-sensei. Shino said, I also agree to your conditions, sensei. Hinata muttered, I'll do my best to prove myself, sensei. For Naruto's sake, I can't afford to make a mistake, she added in her mind. These three may actually have some potential, Kurenai thought. I just hope that I'm not doing something that I'm going to regret later. Very well, I'll hold you three to it. You lead the way, Guy. Mighty Guy exclaimed, Yosh! Let us be off, as he started out, followed by Team 8 and his genin. Returning to the starting point, God damn. Looks like we missed one hell of a party, Enko said, looking around the area at the damage. She wasn't a Jonin sensei or a member of the three-man Anbu squadron that was mobilized, but she joined them because she thought someone might be damaging the area around her favorite training spot, the Forest of Death. The Anbu and Jonin didn't feel like trying to tell her to leave because of her reputation. It looks like someone was recklessly using explosive tags, or possibly some other types of explosives, said one of the Anbu. Asuma answered, at first glance, it is. But, I doubt that you can find explosives that can make these sort of craters at your local shinobi weapons shop. Not even the 12 Guardian Ninja or the Samurai have tools this destructive. Kakashi added, staring at a crater with his Sharingan eye, not to mention that there seems to be some sort of residue substance in the craters. It looks similar to chakra, but the color is all wrong. Normal chakra is usually blue, yet this substance has a light purple color. Enko exclaimed, and check out this out, and gestured toward what looked to be another crater a short distance from the group's location. Another anonymous Anbu remarked, big deal, we've got plenty those laying all over the ground. Enko replaced his usual dangerous smirk with a serious expression and said, trust me, you would want to see this one. The two Jonin and Anbu chose to at least make fun of her after noticing the expression. However, they were surprised by what they saw. Instead of the normal circular crater, there was a rectangular indent that wasn't as deep as the previous ones. More precisely, it had a ragged, saw-like portion in front of it that served as a toe of sorts. When Asuma said, it looks like some kind of footprint, but that's impossible. I've never heard of any sort of summons that makes these sort of tracks. The Anbu captain remarked, perhaps that's because we're not dealing with any sort of animal at all. Look, these footprints continue on for a while before they change. In fact, the group noticed that the footprints vanished a few yards away from where they were standing and were replaced by two parallel, rectangular tracks that resembled tread along the path of the battlefield. These fresh sets of tracks persisted. Looks like, whatever this thing is, went down this way, and is going to come across the village's wall. If we're lucky, we can possibly catch up to it and actually see what we're dealing with. Kakashi interrupted, there's more bad news, I'm afraid. In between the larger set of tracks, he was examining a number of pairs of smaller footprints. There are additional sets of footprints here. Based on what I can tell, one set was created by Sandals in the shinobi style, but I'm not sure who owns the other set. Anbu, who had been silent during the entire investigation, said, so, this thing is possibly chasing after one of our shinobi. The situation appears to have shifted from potential enemy espionage or sabotage to an assassination scenario. At that point, the Anbu captain said, let's move out, we can't afford to waste any more time. Our main objectives are to find this intruder and prevent him or her from reaching his or her target. The 5 shinobi and 1 kunoichi then started down the lengthy path of devastation. Returning with Spitfire and Naruto. Where is the spark going, Naruto? They were now moving toward a mountain range that jutted in towards the village. With the village's protective wall built to include part of the mountainside, it was at this location that the Hokage monument was created, and it was also where Naruto found Spitfire's panel. Spitfire yelled as the sounds of Megatron chasing them assaulted his audio receptors, and the cannons firing almost non-stop sounded loudly behind them. Megatron is going to provide us with some cover. This mountain contains an old, deserted base. It served as a backup communications station and a safety measure in the event that enemy ninja attacked the village. Naruto yelled over the laser blasts. Is it not possible for us to simply take a cove in the forest to our right? The Mini-Con remarked. We'd probably have more success losing him there. Never in hell. The most hazardous training ground this village has to offer is the Forest of Death. Going through there would be like us signing our own death warrants. Naruto shot back, the Mini-Con clearly able to hear the fear in his voice. However, one base won't be much use against Megatron with his tank mode, he would simply run right through it. No, he won't. A number of sharp rocks blocked the base's entrance before the weather or the shinobi themselves separated them from the main mountain. They were most likely a part of it at the right time. How did you find out about this? Hey, you tend to pick up a few things when you're trying to hide from a mob of drunken villagers. He knew all too well how Megatron treated those he captured, what he did to those he deemed useless to him, and given all the trouble Naruto had caused Megatron, Spitfire was beginning to doubt that he would ever see another day in the Leaf Village, even though he had made a mental note to throw rocks at some of the civilians' windows at midnight, if they ever managed to escape this mess. If he didn't kill the boy first, Spitfire was certain that the Decepticon would condemn his friend to a life of unending suffering and menial labor. The most distinctive feature of the base, however, was the large building that appeared to be being swallowed up by the mountain. It essentially looked like a cubicle building encased in the mountain, with one corner jutting out in the open. As they approached their destination, Spitfire noticed what Naruto was referring to. A number of sections of rock that appeared to be protruding from the ground, leaving very little space between them. They appeared to be extremely thick and about a foot taller than Megatron in his robot mode. If Spitfire had to estimate, a perfect defense against enemies. As he watched the human and Mini-Con pass through the first line of rocks, Megatron saw this too, but he didn't give it much thought. As if a few pointy rocks and a disused base can stand up against the might of Megatron, he thought. Knowing that he was about to be given a nasty surprise, Megatron kept moving forward, intent on capturing his quarry, until his right front treadmill collided with one of the rocks, giving him a shuddering shock before he stopped entirely. What? Megatron roared as he attempted to move closer to Spitfire and Naruto, but his treadmills were ineffective and kicked up dirt in their wake. This isn't possible. In this hellish steampunk world, I will not be fooled by any human. Once more, Megatron felt his anger burning hotter and hotter inside him. He yelled the Decepticon as he pushed against the rock with all of his might, but it wouldn't budge. He couldn't back up and turn around because there were rocks to the left and right of the one that was blocking him, and they were all too close together for him to pass by between them. He couldn't just pass over or through them in robot mode because the rocks were too tall and the spaces between them were too narrow for him to move freely. You see, I told you what? As they dashed through the rocky barriers, Naruto told Spitfire, Megatron won't be moving for a while. All we need to do now is Zapow. Blam. Whoa. As the rock in front of him was reduced to rubble by a laser blast, Naruto yelled. Even this was not enough for Megatron, who had already destroyed about 2/3 of the field and was now working on the remaining third, but the two flinched as they looked back and saw Megatron blasting away with his cannons, carving himself an opening. Change. Megatron roared, and a second later, he reverted to his robot form and dashed in the direction of the rocky defense's last line. Dude. We must move, Spitfire, hurry up, Naruto said, pulling the Mini-Con through the base's entrance. They made it in just time, as Megatron rammed himself against the base's last line of defense. Despite the amount of force behind the collision, the rocks still remained, with only a few cracks to show for Megatron's handiwork. This did not deter the giant at all, as he soon began raining his fists down, one after the other, upon the obstructions blocking his path. He had gone through this humiliation at the hands of some organic for far too long, that he refused to return now empty-handed. Without warning, his internal scanners alerted him that 3 energy signatures had been detected behind him. Megatron quickly turned around to see who had the nerve to sneak up behind him, only to see that it was a trio of masked humans, wearing some sort of chest armor underneath beige cloaks, and had some sort of bladed weapons strapped to their backs. Not wanting any more interference with the locals, Megatron quickly leveled his fusion cannon at the interlopers, and fired a quick shot. They never stood a chance. Pleased at seeing their smoldering remains scattered about, Megatron resumed his onslaught on the rocky barrier. Gosh. Those won't hold up against him for long. We must locate a higher altitude. Spitfire, hurry up and come this way. I feel like a dog that has just run to the end of its leash, Naruto said, starting to guide the Mini-Con toward a set of stairs that appeared to spiral up in a rectangular pattern to the upper levels of the building. However, he stopped suddenly, feeling as though Spitfire was staring up at the stairs with a trembling frame. Spitfire? What is the matter, Spitfire? We must continue to move. What is the height of these stairs? Spitfire asked. his quiver clearly audible as he spoke. I went all the way to the mountain's summit the last time I checked. Why are you asking? Is there another way to get out besides going you up TT there? The only path to the outside is this one. The only entrance is Megatron's, and the only remaining passageways lead to a secret underground location. Furthermore, I would rather take my chances in the open than put myself in a potential coffin. No, it's impossible to go up there. What's wrong with you? You've been to high places before, such as the old man's office and the Hokage monument. What makes this different, then? I had previously visited those locations and spent those times with people I knew. However, this is a totally different area, and I'm not sure how high we're going to end up. Additionally, the mere thought of ascending unknown heights causes my central processor to freeze, causing me to which uncontrollably, reliving unpleasant memories, and essentially entering street stasis lock. However, this is a life or death situation. Only a line of mountain rocks will keep Megatron out of this place. As he is out there, we're practically dead if we don't take action right away. ICCC can't. TT2SS scared to move. Please, Spitfire, hurry up, we must leave now. NN no. CC can't repeat the process. Never again can IGG go down by myself. Spitfire, hear me out, you're not going to die, and you're not going up there alone, Naruto said abruptly, grabbing the mini-con by the shoulders and shaking him until he was awakened from his daze. The mini-con saw a serious Naruto with resolute eyes. I'll be by your side the entire time. Additionally, I'll make sure Megatron never touches you. I swear to you that I will do everything in my power to ensure the safety of both you and this panel. The blonde could have avoided all of this destruction if he had simply given him and the panel to Megatron, but here he was risking his very life to keep an alien he didn't really know safe. Spitfire simply stared at Naruto with what amounted to awe. This young human had witnessed firsthand what Megatron was willing to do to achieve his goals and how violent he would become if anyone decided to stand up against him. Spitfire uttered the words, "Okay, let's leave now." The two fledglings ran up the stairs without saying anything more, and they reached about halfway past the second floor before hearing a loud crash and the clatter of debris, followed by the sound of thunderous footsteps, which indicated that Megatron was inside the base. Astonishingly, I can smell you, boy, so you can't run away from me. The roar reverberated throughout the building, and Naruto didn't dare stop to see where Megatron was, so he continued running until he reached the third floor, where the stairs continued on the opposite side, requiring them to run across the floor to reach the stairs. They were about halfway across when he felt something approaching from behind, and without warning, Megatron's claw-horned head suddenly broke through the floor, like a shark's dorsal fin breaking through water, and the next instant, Megatron's left hand erupted from the floor in a frenzied attempt to grab the pair with a sudden burst of energy he wasn't aware he had. Naruto doubled his pace, and had just reached the stairs as Megatron's hand swiped at the space they had previously occupied. The human with the mini-cons had gotten away from him yet again, and Megatron growled in annoyance as he looked up at the spiraling stairs and saw that damned human in the mini-con staring down at him over the railing of the stairs like he was a museum exhibit. Maggot, he growled, glaring at the two before their heads vanished and the sound of rapid footfalls resumed. Alongside squads 8 and 9, well, how far did that blonde jerk go in any case? As he and the other members of Squad 8 followed Guy's team, Kiba inquired. Go back there and be quiet. Please don't reveal our positions, Neji interrupted. The Inuzuka muttered, sheesh, he didn't have to be a jerk about it. He was a little taken aback by what he saw as he surveyed the area. There were large craters all over the ground, and some of the trees appeared to have been blasted apart. In addition, there was a peculiar smell that seemed to grow stronger as they followed the path of destruction, towards a building in the mountains. He wasn't sure what was causing the smell, but it was undoubtedly causing Akamaru a lot of distress. Hey, boy, what's the matter? Kiba inquired, and Akamaru simply whimpered pathetically before withdrawing into his master's parka. What's wrong, Kiba, with Akamaru? After listening to the puppy's whining, Hinata inquired. Hey, keep quiet back there, I told you, Neji was interrupted. Kurenai snapped, don't yell at your comrades like that. They might have learned important information, and additionally, you're the one who's probably going to notify the enemy of our position with your yelling like that. When teammates looked down on their teammates, it was the one thing that truly enraged her. Kiba, is there something that you need to tell us? It's just that, Akamaru is getting more and more anxious the further we go, and he never behaves like this unless there is. The young Inuzuka suddenly detected a scent that he had previously detected, but never in such quantities. There was no denying that it was, despite being mingled with the unfamiliar aroma. With a cry of, blood! I smell blood up ahead, and lots of it, the Inuzuka instantly attracted everyone's attention. Are you sure? Guy inquired. his cheerful demeanor giving way to a grave one. Positive, I'd recognize that smell anywhere even though it is mixed with something else I can't identify. There's definitely blood up ahead, Kiba replied. After a brief period of silence, Guy halted, and the other ninja imitated his movements. The assembled shinobi were stunned by what they saw in front of them. The building appeared as though something enormous had plowed through the entrance, and the ground was covered in craters and crushed stones. The crater in front of the strewn about remains of what looked like humans, however, was the most unsettling sight. Only a partially masked head and a severed hand provided clues as to what they had once been. There were no whole bodies, only strewn fragments of burned flesh. All Kiba could say was, "Shit," while Akamaru merely whimpered and buried himself entirely in Kiba's parka. Nor were the other genin doing any better. Hinata was shaking and Lee appeared as green as his spandex before she lost it and puked. Tenten was by her side, trying to soothe her by massaging her back. Neji made an effort to keep his face serious and dignified, but he couldn't help but wince at what he saw. Shino made a deep buzzing noise that suggested he was upset about the circumstances. Kurenai and Guy, however, were more interested in the head with the partially ruined mask. Instead of speaking, they nodded in agreement, sending a silent message to one another that these were his men. Lee yelled, "Look! Someone is up on the roof." Something at the top of the building was what he was pointing to. With Spitfire and Naruto were almost there. "Spitfire, hurry up!" Spitfire followed, keeping his optics fixed on the ground and doing his best not to look around to see how high up they were. "There should be a bridge goes over this huge crevice between the mountain and the building," Naruto said, calling back to his metallic friend as he guided him to the left edge of the building. It had been a terrifying race, but they finally made it to the top. If that is crossed, then... With his eyes still fixed on the ground, Spitfire collided with Naruto as he abruptly stopped. "Naruto." "What the pit, Naruto?" "We stopped, but why?" Spitfire inquired. "The bridge is gone." "What? I stated it was gone. Rust or something must have caused it to collapse. Ignore that, we'll just..." After hearing a slight boom from beneath him, Naruto heard a giant fist suddenly pierce the roof, then another fist, and finally Megatron himself pierce what was left of the roof. Naruto immediately retreated as Megatron pulled himself up onto the building's roof. "Tell me, Fleshling, what drives you, fear or bravery?" Megatron growled as he stalked slowly in the direction of the orange-clad human. Naruto simply retreated one step for every step Megatron took forward, but he stopped abruptly when he heard debris slide off the edge. He glanced over his shoulder and saw that he was just one step away from falling over the edge. Returning to the ground level, Naruto, Hinata wept as she looked on in helplessness. Guy and Kurenai couldn't help but stare at what they saw on the roof. They had never seen anything like what was standing on top of the old base in their entire lives, and initially assumed it was just a strong genjutsu, but after they attempted to dispel it, they realized it wasn't. "Neji, what the devil? I believed we were up against a massive mobile cannon." Akamaru, now trembling uncontrollably in his parka, interrupted Kiba. We really are." With his Byakugan still in use, Neji declared, "I believe that to be the cannon." "Now, what on earth are you talking about? Some of the elements that comprise the cannon are present in that giant, like those structures that are on its shoulders and head. How did it transform from a cannon to a giant man, if that's the case?" Tenten inquired. Neji's only response was, "I have no idea, Tenten. Naruto is back. What am I going to do now? We're practically trapped like rats." Naruto yelled in his head as he frantically tried to come up with a plan of action. "No, this can't end like this. Not after everything Naruto's been through. And just when he was about to start his career as a ninja. He risked so much to protect me, and now I've practically put a giant target on the back of his head. I can't let Megatron get his hands on him, but what can an acrophobic bot like me do? I haven't flown in stellar cycles. I mean, will my flight systems still work? But, human, I'll give you this: in spite of everything you've done to me, as annoying as you are, your special abilities have piqued my interest," Megatron said, rousing Minikon and the human from their reverie. His sneer revealed that he was relishing every moment of their situation. As he aimed his fusion cannon directly at Naruto, he continued, "I'm a reasonable bot, so I shall give you this last deal that you'll find to be most generous on my part. Hand over the Minikon standing behind you, as well as the panel you have in your arms, and you may live to be my pet. Or I put an end to your miserable life while you keep up your pointless resistance." "I have a plan," Naruto Spitfire thought. "That's it, I have to at least give it a try. Anything's better than being at the mercy of this psychopath." He crept as close to Naruto as he could without attracting Megatron's attention. "Incite Megatron to fire," the tiny jet bot muttered. "What?" Naruto hardly returned the whisper. "As soon as I give the signal, jump off the edge and make Megatron shoot at us. I know when to avoid the blasts because I've looked down the barrel of that blasted weapon a few times already. Yes, but what comes next? We would be falling to our deaths unless you were Spitfire. It's the only alternative we have. This is our only option, or we give in to Megatron. But, your fear of heights, and, I understand, Naruto, what else can we do, though? Please, you must have faith in me. For a brief moment, Naruto kept quiet, trying to at least consider their current predicament and come up with some other means of escape, but he wasn't overly excited about leaping from a mountain without a safe landing. So, human, what is your response? Megatron yelled impatiently. Naruto braced himself, flipped the Decepticon the bird, and glared up at him. Up yours, claw head, Naruto screamed. As he primed his cannon, Megatron scowled down at the human and said, "Oh, so unwise." Naruto watched in stunned horror as the fusion generator whirred to life and he saw a purple glow inside the barrel grow brighter and brighter. Spitfire watched the barrel until the purple glow reached its maximum level without getting any brighter. Right now, as Megatron shot at the spot where they had been standing, Naruto wasted no time in throwing himself and Spitfire over the edge. The blast exploded on impact, sending stone, rubble and metal fragments flying in their direction, but Naruto was too busy staring at the ground, which was getting closer and closer. Spitfire thought, well, it's now or never. Transform. Spitfire quickly changed his fall so that he was directly beside Naruto, and his form instantly changed to resemble the jet mode he had displayed at the Hokage's office. Hold on, Naruto, he yelled, and Naruto didn't waste any time in obeying his command. He hurriedly tucked the mini-con panel under his jacket, grabbed Spitfire's wings, and set his feet on top of the vertical stabilizers with his friend aboard. Spitfire attempted to turn on his long, idle jet engines, which he initially struggled with but eventually heard their low hum as they started to power up. We're leaving here, so hold on tight, was Naruto's only warning before he felt himself shoot straight down, then level out horizontally at speeds he could only imagine. Everything he saw blurred, and it took everything he had to hold on. This was not supposed to happen. This conflict was not supposed to go on this long, but Megatron was certain as the pit that he would put an end to it, and he reached up to the left side of his head and activated his comlink as he watched his targets fly away, silently seething with rage. Did you read me, Demolisher? He spoke into the link, and after a brief pause, he received a response. I read you clearly, Megatron. Sir, have you gotten the minicon yet? Yes, sir. If there was one thing Megatron detested more than failure, it was having to tell his soldiers that he had failed. He gritted his teeth and barely suppressed his rage. A few altercations have occurred, but not quite. A human had already found the minicon, but in contrast to the others we've already met, this one has shown some abilities I've never seen before. It just so happened that a minicon, perhaps the same one you lost, was with the human and had already awakened. Oh, really? That's fantastic news, Megatron, sir. I knew you would be the one to locate that minicon. Enough of your grating rambling. Does the minicon panel still have a lock on it? Yes, sir. It's heading southwest right now, but I have no idea where it will go. All right, be careful not to lose it. Get the warp gate ready for my return to base. In the interim, prepare a warp gate at those coordinates for when the signal eventually stops moving. Cyclonus, you and I will warp to that location and acquire the human and the mini-cons and make sure Cyclonus, that glitchhead, knows that I want that human to be alive and unharmed, don't you? Yes, sir, immediately, sir. While waiting for the warp gate to reopen, Megatron looked down from where he was standing and saw the gathered group of humans at the base of the building. Some of them were staring off in the direction where the minicon flew off, while the others were still looking at him. Zooming in on them, he saw that they were wearing the same metal-plated headband as that obnoxious blonde human, and the thought of that insect sent waves of rage through his entire body, and seeing even more humans wearing that same headband only made it worse. With a quick snap of his wrist, he leveled his cannon down at the group of humans and fired 3 shots at them. Watching them rapidly disperse like the miserable insects they were, he smirked and vanished through the warp gate. With the fugitive pair, it didn't help that Spitfire occasionally wobbled as they zoomed across the land, and he could hardly keep his eyes open, and what he could see were just unrecognizable blurs when he held on for dear life. That was all Naruto could say. He never imagined he would be flying today, let alone at the speed Spitfire was going. He believed they passed a few teams of shinobi, but he couldn't tell. They were moving too fast. Where are we going, Spitfire? Over the roaring slipstream, Naruto let out a scream. As long as it's away from Megatron, I don't care. Or no, Spitfire said, but Naruto noticed that it sounded like Spitfire was having trouble with something. The blonde simply assumed that it was because the minicon hadn't flown in years. Suddenly, Naruto noticed that there were fewer trees and that buildings were becoming more and more prevalent. "You've flown into the village, Spitfire." With a voice that sounded more desperate than before, Naruto yelled, "Come on, let's leave before the Anbu is warned." "I'm making an effort. You see, I'm a little rusty when it comes to flying," Spitfire answered, then changed his direction and boosted his engine's output. The sudden acceleration almost knocked Naruto off balance, but he managed to hold on despite the wind beating against his ears. He could still hear the startled cries of those below, some of which he could partially identify as coming from shinobi requesting reinforcements. Fortunately, they had only re-entered the village around the center, so the main village gate was not that far away. He could already see it looming at a decreasing distance, and they were just a few seconds away from flying over it when all of a sudden, a huge, thick wall of earth appeared in front of them, effectively blocking their path. Naruto knew right away that a ninja was behind it, and he knew that at the speed they were traveling, Spitfire wouldn't have time to flee or change course, so he grimaced and braced himself for the sickening crash that was about to occur, but Spitfire had other ideas. Spitfire locked onto the wall in front of him, and opened fire with the machine guns built into his nose cone, creating a massive cloud of dust and rubble that covered the two as they flew over the main gate. They continued for what seemed like hours before Spitfire was unable to continue. "Prepare yourself, Naruto. It could be a difficult landing." Spitfire said this as he started to slowly descend toward the ground. As they were about to touch down, Spitfire abruptly switched back into robot mode, and he and Naruto landed roughly on the ground, tumbled around, and finally came to a stop. Lying on their backs they stayed there, attempting to recover from the abrupt rush of their escape. "Was that the first flight you've taken in years?" In between breaths, Naruto questioned. "Yes, that's pretty much it. After being grounded for a few solar cycles. It's not too bad, is it?" An equally exhausted Minikon responded. Before assisting Spitfire to his feet, Naruto said, "Well, you managed to get us a few miles out of the Leaf Village." He looked around and saw that they were in a clearing. "And we got away from Megatron," he added. "Oh, I wouldn't make that assumption so quickly." The voice that sounded from behind them filled them with fear, and when Naruto turned around, he saw that it was Megatron himself, sneering down at them. "What? How did you arrive so quickly? And how were you able to locate us?" Naruto demanded. "Human, simple. Every Minikon panel emits a frequency that our base can easily track. We only needed to ask you to stop moving. How did I get here so quickly? Oh, and I hope you don't mind, but I've brought some friends along with me," Megatron said with a smug grin. "Well, once you have mastered transwarp technology, there is no limit to where you can travel to." Two more giant robots, transwarped, into the area, forming a triangle that effectively surrounded the two. Naruto's right-hand robot had strange-looking hands, 2 spikes on each shoulder, and green eyes, the right one being much larger than the left, while his left-hand robot had 2 cannons mounted on his arms, a strange structure on his back, and appeared to be sniggering while its green eyes never left him. Both of them were wearing the same purple insignia that Megatron proudly wore. "So, Demolisher, this is the reason you woke me up?" the giggling robot remarked. "Well, it sure beats lying around the base all day. Remember, Cyclonus, you stupid fool, that I want the human to live and be intact. That also applies to you, Demolisher," Megatron uttered. "Yes, sir," the one assigned to Demolisher yelled. "Yes, indeed, boss, don't worry about it," Cyclonus answered. "It's not like this lil human is going to cause any trouble for the 3 of us." "Hey, you metallic fools have already learned, first rule of combat. Never underestimate your opponents," Naruto yelled, grabbing their attention, and then hurriedly channeled as much chakra as he could into his most powerful jutsu with multiple shadow clone. Change. Smoke immediately filled the space that the Decepticons had surrounded. "Hey, hello. What's the spark doing?" Cyclonus, trying to make sense of what was happening to him, demanded. "This is why I called you all here. Contain the entire group, without causing severe harm to any of them," growled Megatron, his eyes sweeping across the vast mass of figures that all resembled Naruto and Spitfire. "Ensure none of them get away. CHHARRRGGGGEE." The newly formed army roared as they all charged at the 3 enormous metal giants. The Decepticons were startled when they felt various sensations, particularly Megatron, hit their legs with force. "So my theory was right after all. This human has the power to create physical duplicates of himself, as well as the power to alter his physical appearance. However, these duplicates aren't that durable," Megatron said, slicing at some clones that were crawling up his legs and turning them into clouds of smoke. He looked at his men and saw that they, too, had clones crawling all over them. Those blasted things still tried to escape, but he and his troops managed to stop them, albeit a little more awkwardly than usual because of the numerous humans, and Minicons crawling all over them. The whole situation was extremely frustrating, and Cyclonus's notorious hair-trigger temper was not helping. "Get off of me, you damned pests! Leave, don't do that, please. Oh no, go ahead and slag this. This is the only way I can handle it. Change." After leaping into the air and switching to his vehicle mode, a heavily armed combat helicopter, Cyclonus raised himself to a suitable altitude and aimed his laser cannons at the group. "Wait, Cyclonus, don't do it." Cyclonus fired a shot, and the large mass of clones they had corralled were thrown all over the place by the ensuing explosion, but as they hit the ground, they and the ones that were still clinging to the Decepticons poofed out of existence until there was only one human and Minicon lying on the ground. Motionless Demolisher yelled, but his warning was met with deaf audio receptors. "Hey, it was simple." He spoke with assurance, not realizing until it was too late how much pain he was about to endure. "You were an idiot. I specifically told you, you ignorant buffoon, that I wanted that human alive, not for it to be blown apart." Megatron roared as he delivered a fierce punch to Cyclonus's head, sending him tumbling to the ground. Furthermore, did it ever occur to you that you might have destroyed both the accompanying Minicon panel and the one it had? Exactly how foolish are you? This is so absurd that it's not even a Starscream. The trembling Cyclonus was on his knees and groveling at the Decepticon commander as he stalked over to him. "Pardon me, Megatron, please. I was unable to resist. You know I've always used my guns to get rid of pests. Come on, that thing was just as annoying to you as it was to me." With his fist raised to continue his attack, Megatron said dangerously, "Save your petty excuses." Demolisher immediately attempted to step in on his comrade's behalf. After noticing this, he conducted a comprehensive analysis of the downed human after focusing his scanners on it. Demolisher swiftly interrupted Megatron's attempt to administer Cyclonus's punishment by saying, "Megatron, sir, I've just finished a preliminary scan on the human, and found out that it is just unconscious also. Both the activated Minicon and the panel sustained no damage from the attack." Megatron walked up to the two unconscious figures on the ground and said, Don't think that this is over. Cyclonus, you're just lucky that the human and Minicons survived your blunder." He was about to reach down and seize his prize when something hit him from behind and exploded upon impact. "But make no mistake, you will be punished for your recklessness once we return to base." The Decepticon was startled by the explosion, but it didn't cause any real pain. A voice saying, "That's as far as you're getting to them, Megatron," came from behind. When Megatron heard that voice, her eyes narrowed. He had seen the owner a number of times before, so he didn't need to see who owned it. He was perhaps the only Transformer Megatron had simultaneously admired and hated: the leader of those damned Autobots. The one bot that could easily compete with him. With the barrel of an ion blaster still smoking from a shot, Megatron turned to see a red and blue robot pointing it at him. It was the same as Optimus Prime. As he aimed his ion blaster at his longtime foe, Optimus commanded, "I'm only going to say this once. Megatron, back away from the Minicon, and I'll let you leave with what's left of your dignity." Determining the location of the new Minicon had proven challenging. The base's detection systems had come dangerously close to losing the energy signature multiple times. Red Alert and Alexis had to work together to get the coordinates for the location of the warp gate locked on. "Prime, I should have expected this. You always seem to arrive at the most inappropriate times, but it doesn't matter. I refuse to leave this spark-forsaken dump empty-handed." Megatron responded to the Autobot commander. The commander of the Decepticon was furious before that hellish Autobot commander had even reached him. He had the Minicons and human specimen just inches from his grasp. When Optimus saw the unconscious human next to the Minicon at Megatron's feet, he was about to move forward. Optimus's energon boiled at the sight of the wounded boy. Even though he knew how far Megatron would go to accomplish his objectives, he was still appalled by how readily he would take the lives of innocent people in order to obtain what he desired. "Megatron, you will pay for what you've done to the inhabitants of this world." "Fa. Don't you start preaching to me, Prime. You act as if you're the defender of truth and justice in this war, when in reality you are no more a saint than I am. How many times have you turned a blind optic to the suffering of other lifeforms just because it inconvenienced your forces? How many lives, whether they be Decepticons or not, have you taken for the sake of your ideals?" The optics of Optimus narrowed a little, as if you have any right to lecture me about unnecessary casualties. "I'll admit that I have made sacrifices in the past that haunt me to this day, but those pale in comparison to the atrocities that you and your soldiers have committed. We Autobots strive to protect the innocent from tyranny at any cost, whilst you Decepticons attack and enslave civilizations just because you believe that you're entitled to. I've seen firsthand of the destruction that your forces have brought upon other worlds, and I'll be damned if I allow this world to suffer the same fate. Now, I won't tell you again. Step away from the Minicon and human, now." Then both Cyclonus and Demolisher pointed their weapons at Optimus, Megatron pointing the barrel of his fusion cannon straight at the Autobot commander's head. "Oh please, Optimus," Megatron shot back, "you're in no position to issue any demands to me because in case you haven't noticed, you're sorely outnumbered and outgunned, 3-1. I must say, Prime, I'm severely disappointed in you bullheadedly charging in with guns a-blazing. I'd expect an Autobot rookie to behave like that, not from a seasoned soldier like you, Optimus." "Heh, yeah, he must have scrambled his neural net when he transwarped here, huh?" laughed Cyclonus. "I guess this means that Autobots are done for. Woo ha ha ah ha 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 gah." Cyclonus's laughter was cut short when Hotshot jumped through a recently opened warp gate directly behind the Decepticon and gave him a strong flying sidekick to the back, sending him to the ground in a jumbled heap. Hotshot exclaimed, "Us? Done for? Keep dreaming, laughing bot," before sprinting in the direction of the fallen Decepticon in an attempt to resume his attack before his adversary recovered his composure after letting out a growl. Cyclonus stood up and charged at the yellow Autobot. A fierce clash of metal ensued as the two bots met halfway, with each Cybertronian attempting to push the other back. Demolisher exclaimed, "It's the Autobots, they've found us," just before he was about to open fire where he believed Prime's third team member would attack. He was confused to discover that he was aiming his shoulder cannons at nothing. He didn't realize a second warp gate was opening up on his left as he kept trying to understand the situation he was in. When he did, it was too late to protect his midsection from Red Alert's elbow strike. The force of the assault caused him to skid backward, creating deep trenches where his feet were dragged. The Autobot medic was determined to remove Demolisher from the battle as soon as possible and didn't want to give his opponent time to heal. Demolisher had just enough time to mount some resistance against Red Alert before spotting the approaching Autobot at the last second. Megatron growled, "Arg! You incompetent fools." He tried desperately to seize the unconscious Mini-Con and human and warp back to the base after realizing that his soldiers would not be able to defeat their opponents in a short amount of time. When an explosive laser round struck his right shoulder treads and sent him flying back, that plan fell apart. Even though the shot didn't cause much structural damage, it was effective as a diversion because he didn't notice the flying round kick until it struck his face, which further confused his senses. When his eyesight returned, he saw his most vile adversary punching him. Megatron caught the punch with his left hand, holding it in place with reflexes refined by years of fighting. In order to take advantage of this, he threw a right cross at Optimus, who caught it with his own hand. This led to a standoff between the two leaders, who were both attempting to overwhelm the other. Megatron grunted, his orange eyes glimmering with barely contained anger. "RRG, why must you always interfere with affairs that don't concern you, Optimus?" With his own yellow-tinted optics gleaming brightly, Optimus retorted, "As long as you continue to enslave Mini-Cons for your own selfish desires, and destroy the innocent bystanders that get in your way, then I'll always be there to stop you, Megatron." "Huh. That's so like you Autobots, always assuming that we destroy everything in our path just because we can. You should know by now, Prime, that we Decepticons treasure any source of power that we can find, whether it comes from a Mini-Con or a human." "Human? What do you mean human? What sick scheme are you plotting now? Haven't you heard? Apparently, the humans in this world have energy levels that are almost similar to that of a Mini-Con, and that's not all. They also possess unique powers that one could only dream of wielding." That human laying on the ground over there, he has the ability to make numerous replicas of himself to the point that he can create his own personal army. With powers like that at my control, the Decepticons will finally conquer Cybertron, and then, the entire universe. "There's no way that I'll allow you to use an innocent human child for your demented agenda," shouted Optimus. The Autobot was caught off guard when Megatron kneed Optimus in the torso, creating a large enough gap for Megatron to land a devastating left cross that sent Optimus flying back. "Huh? You say that as if you can actually stop me, Prime." Megatron shot back as Megatron leveled his fusion cannon at Optimus, who was sadly not too badly shaken by the attack. He was able to charge up an ion pulse wave. Optimus released the energy that had accumulated around his clasped hands into a multicolored energy beam with large atom shapes in the center just as Megatron opened fire. Before exploding with a tremendous explosion that caused the two Cybertronian commanders to slide farther apart, the two attacks clashed, each attempting to overwhelm the other. The shock wave that resulted had pushed Megatron farther away from the human and Mini-Con, much to his dismay. His internal sensors detected an incoming mass of energy signatures moving toward his location just as he was ready to take another swing at his most despised adversary. Ordinarily, he would have fought the Autobots and the newcomers with ruthless brutality, showing no regard for them. However, he had some unsettling doubts after his brief encounter with the blonde adolescent human. What could a squadron of fully grown humans accomplish if a young fleshling from this world could conjure up a vast army out of thin air? In addition, his attention would be split between eliminating Prime and squelching the intrusive insects, in which case he would probably lose his quarries and sustain significant damage from the assault. If the approaching humans were even more problematic to handle than the child, the more violent and undignified urgings he wanted to let loose had to be suppressed as he returned his focus to his opponent. Before he let the transwarp gate drag him back to the moon base, Megatron exclaimed, "Don't think that this is over, Optimus. I will reclaim all of the mini-cons, and any other source of power that I find the next time we meet. You'll be nothing but a molten puddle of slag, and Cybertron will finally belong to the Decepticons." Demolisher and Cyclonus, who were already frowning at their loss, trailed behind their leader after verifying that the Decepticons had actually vanished. Optimus hurried back to the location where the fallen boy and Mini-Con were lying and called Red Alert to him. The warrior-turned-medic got to work right away, using his medical device to perform a diagnostic scan on the two prone bodies. There didn't appear to be any significant damage to the Mini-Con that couldn't be fixed back at home base, so the readings he was getting weren't cause for immediate concern. However, there was something strange about the person. The scan revealed some minor burns, a few cracked ribs, and severe internal bruising, but the results showed that the injuries were healing on their own. If that wasn't enough, the scans showed that the boy's energy reserves were at least twice as high as those he had typically observed in any Mini-Con, despite the fact that he appeared to be emitting an energy signature that was similar to the Mini-Con next to him. Well, the both of them aren't in any immediate danger. The Mini-Con is just in temporary stasis. The boy, however, is exhibiting some strange behavior that shouldn't be seen in humans, said the doctor. What do you mean by strange behavior? Well, for starters, the boy's body is healing itself at an accelerated rate, much faster than how normal humans recover from injuries according to their medical studies. A recovery rate like this should be impossible. Is there anything else? Actually, there's. Whilst searching the boy for any life-threatening injuries, my scanners detected an energy signature that is similar to that of a Mini-Con. A Mini-Con? Are you sure that your scan is accurate, Red Alert? Optimus responded. The Autobot leader did find it appealing that a human could have traits in common with Mini-Con. Simply put, it sounded too much like an experiment approved by Megatron. Then he remembered Megatron's description of naturally occurring, superhuman beings. He couldn't possibly be telling the truth, could he? I'm sure, sir. The frequency is constantly changing right now, mostly because of his physical state, but it's still there. Maybe it would be more obvious if the boy had more time to heal from his injuries. Well, we don't have that much time as we approach our current location, Optimus. I'm detecting a number of strong energy signatures. It appears that the locals are not pleased with us encroaching on their territory. Hotshot's suspicion was confirmed when the two older Autobots saw that multiple energy spikes were in fact rapidly moving in their direction. Sir, what are your orders? Red Alert inquired. Though he didn't have much time before things took a turn for the worse, Optimus stayed silent for a moment, considering the options that were open to him. Coming. Before the burning tags that were fastened to them exploded with unexpected force, Optimus only issued this warning as a huge barrage of tiny knives rained down near their position. What's that slag? When did daggers start to detonate like grenades? Remain focused, Hotshot. They were supposed to be a distraction. Red Alert yelled, and sure enough, the three were soon surrounded by more exploding knives, enormous pieces of earth, lightning bolts, and large dragon-shaped projectiles made entirely of flame. By tracking the trajectory of the projectiles, the Cybertronians were able to determine, using the limited telescopic range of their optical sensors, that a large platoon of humans was rapidly approaching their location. The humans were wearing green vests with front pockets and headbands that each had a metal plate with a spiraling design etched on it. In fact, it was very similar to the one the unconscious boy was wearing at that point. They discovered who was launching those projectile attacks, as more fire, lightning, and earth-based attacks were hurled in their direction. Oh, hurry up! Since when can humans throw lightning at objects or shoot fireballs from their mouths? Yelled Hotshot, barely avoiding another dragon-shaped flame projectile that would have hit his head before jumping to avoid a lightning bolt aimed at his knee. Are the children at the base able to participate in this as well? Red Alert was too busy avoiding the Earth dragons, which behaved more like homing missiles, to say anything. Optimus was struggling with all three elemental attacks, and the shock of witnessing Megatron's earlier claim that superpowered humans were real, right in front of him, had almost taken him by surprise. He and his soldiers were able to avoid the larger attacks, but the smaller explosive knives still managed to hit them, causing them mild pain and irritation, while the explosives did little damage to their armor despite the great distance between them. The humans appeared to have taken notice of that fact, as more and more explosive knives were thrown at the Autobots at progressively greater intervals, providing the distraction necessary for the elemental attacks to be more effective. A fire dragon and a barrage of explosive knives flew past Optimus just as he was about to give the order for Hot Shot and Red Alert to secure the Mini-Con and reactivate the warp gate. He was about to jump to save the unconscious Mini-Con after remembering who was behind him, but his eyes widened when he realized who the real target of the attacks was. In an effort to protect the young human from the impending assault, Prime hurled himself in front of the blonde boy, kneeling down on one knee with his back to the attackers, realizing he had little time to move. The flame dragon was more painful than the small improvised explosives, which were relatively easy to weather because they felt like weaker versions of the frag grenades used back on Cybertron. The commander felt flames as hot as the pit itself burned through his armor plating, possibly melting a few circuits, but he was powerless to stop the agonized scream from escaping as the fiery construct slammed into his back just as the last of the flames went out. The powerful Autobot fell onto his hands, but the young boy's sight never left him. His frustration with the attacking humans turned to anger as he thought, "There's no doubt about it, that last attack wasn't meant to hit us or the Mini-Con. They truly intended to murder a child in the name of protecting their house. However, why?" Optimus, sir, are you all right?" He snapped out of his reverie to see that his two subordinates were kneeling in front of him. Worried about his welfare, he also saw that the attacks by the humans had paused for a moment. "I'm fine, but we need to retreat now. Red Alert, Hot Shot, take the human and the Mini-Con, and head back to base. I'll provide cover fire for the two of you." Red Alert appeared uncertain. "Sir, are you sure that's wise? If these humans are capable of?" Optimus yelled, "I gave you a direct order, soldier, and I expect you to follow it. Now go," as he turned to fire his double-barreled wrist cannons at the platoon that was still charging. Red Alert remained silent while he changed, allowing Hot Shot to carefully place the two bodies inside the all-terrain emergency vehicle through the open back doors. The doors slammed shut after he was certain that the two were secure, and Red Alert remotely started the appropriate code algorithm to open the return warp gate beside him. His comrade switched into his sports car mode and awaited their return to base via the warp gate. Optimus kept shooting the humans with his cannons during this time. A tiny part of him wanted to kill the humans for their final stunt, but his conscience controlled that urge before he could do it. His shots, instead, threw up big chunks of dirt as they struck the ground in front of them. The strategy appeared to be effective, as their progress was suddenly halted, and the armed humans jumped back to escape being burned alive by the assault. Then he made arcing movements with his arms from left to right to stop any human who had escaped the first assault from moving forward any farther. However, Optimus swiftly clasped his hands together and sent an ion pulse wave at the ground as soon as he heard the distinctive sound of his men passing through the warp gate. This caused the energy beam to be dragged across the surface and produced a huge smokescreen of dust and dirt. Prime hurled himself through the warp gate, his whole body vanishing in a moment, satisfied that none of the ninja had the courage to charge through the confusion. Alongside the shinobi, the commander of the platoon yelled, "Don't let them escape." Even by shinobi standards, things were becoming increasingly strange for the Jonin. They didn't deal with big, metallic giants every day, after all. Especially considering their propensity to materialize out of thin air and then vanish in an instant. With the help of Ko Hyuga and his Byakugan, he had at last been able to locate the intruders. However, when Ko declared that there were now 6 metal giants at their destination after a few minutes of travel, the tension and anxiety returned, this time with double the intensity. 6. As though one wasn't already awful, after this mission, he was seriously thinking about finding a good psychiatrist. However, when Ko reported that 3 of the giants abruptly vanished, reducing the number of potential hostiles the platoon had to contend with by half, things briefly began to improve for the commander. It was still far better than facing 6 of them, even though their enormous size was depressing and they had not yet discovered what these intruders were capable of. The commander ordered an attack once they were close enough to see the Uzumaki child and the intruders clearly. He instructed the platoon to use long-range ninjutsu and kunai padded with heavy-duty explosive tags to target the giants, and only the giants, because they still had a long way to go. He was astounded to see that the attack had been successful. The invaders had not been seriously harmed by the attacks, but they appeared to be more concerned with avoiding the projectiles than with launching a counterattack. This gave the commander the tiniest hope that he wouldn't have to deal with another disaster like the 9-tailed fox demons, in addition to raising the morale of the entire platoon. However, in a matter of seconds, everything went to hell. 2 of his Chunin fired a barrage of explosive note-laden kunai and a powerful fire dragon flame bullet at the unconscious Uzumaki child as the platoon surged forward, continuing their attacks on the metallic intruder. The attacks were already halfway to taking down their target, so his cries for them to stop were ineffective. The commander was aware that many of his subordinates believed the young boy was the beast that had murdered so many of his fellows, even though he did not. He had hoped that none of them would have chosen to exploit Uzumaki's vulnerability, particularly after he had explicitly ordered them not to do so. Unfortunately, 2 platoon members were prepared to take a chance on whatever penalty he and the Hokage had in store for them. He was now left with no choice but to watch helplessly as a defenseless child was attacked for no fault of his own. That is, until the intruder with the blue and red armor used its own body to protect the boy from the oncoming attacks. The whole platoon froze in shock at the sight of the great creature's selfless deed and the sound of its agonized cries. Nobody had thought something so alien could be so selfless. The shock was short-lived, as the platoon charged again at the 3 imposing titans. However, the struck giant had other ideas. The intruder faced them and pointed what appeared to be pipes mounted on their wrists at them, like a ferocious tiger aroused by some stupid human. Only by Ko's warning were they able to avoid the unexpected barrage of energy rounds that descended to their previous position and burst into a massive plume of fire that sent dirt skyward. If those rounds hit their target dead on, the commander could tell without a practical demonstration that they had sufficient power to kill a shinobi. The platoon attempted to advance, but the giant always seemed to anticipate their movements and used its cannons to drive them back. As he considered hundreds of different ways to overcome this obstacle, the giant suddenly clasped its hands together and threw a multicolored energy beam at them. It then dragged them across the ground in a line, blocking everyone's view with a huge cloud of dust and dirt. When the commander ordered the platoon to charge forward after realizing that the attack was intended only as a distraction, they were greeted by the sight of an empty field that had been scarred by the jutsus that had missed their targets. The whole platoon gazed incredulously at what had once been a titanic battleground. A few of the ninja were so shocked that their jaws were hanging open. The giants simply could not have vanished so instantaneously. One shinobi exclaimed, "Wah, what the fuck?" Ko yelled, They just disappeared, without a trace." While using his Byakugan to try to see through any genjutsu the enemy might have been concealing. What were those things? Some kind of weird summons? Don't be daft, since when do summons look like they're completely made of metal? Akunoichi interrupted, but they vanished into thin air, just like any summon does. What else could they be? Another shinobi exclaimed, "I say they were all demons. Why would demons invade our village out of the blue? Maybe they were reacting to a distress call. I mean, didn't you see how it protected that other D?" The commander yelled, "Enough," and immediately cut off the shinobi in question before he could be executed for violating the Third's law. All other shinobi fell silent as the harsh realities and their severe consequences set in. It doesn't matter what those creatures were, whether they were summons or demons. What we should be more concerned about is how creatures of that size and power were able to infiltrate our village without so much as tripping an alarm, and then vanish into thin air. So instead of thinking up asinine theories, let's process the scene and search for genuine clues as to what these things are, and where they came from. Ko, you take Divisions 1 and 2 to the battlefield. Look for armor fragments, shell casings, anything that looks like they can shed more light on our intruders. Division 3, you're on reconnaissance. Scout ahead as far as border just to make sure that our intruders aren't merely licking their wounds and biding their time for a second assault. Division 4, you are to report back to the Hokage, and alert him of the situation at hand. Except for Sound and Akane, I would like to speak to the both of you on an important issue. The rest of you, move out. The other shinobi vanished in a burst of speed, leaving the head commander with the two aforementioned shinobi alone in the clearing. Gazing down at the father and daughter in front of him, the commander let out a sigh. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, Sound had the slender physique typical of shinobi. His handlebar mustache was neatly trimmed, which was unusual in and of itself because few shinobi chose to grow facial hair in that particular spot, and his long black hair was left loose behind his back. He was dressed in the typical blue shinobi undershirt and pants, with the green flak vest that most jonin and shunin wore covering the shirt. Akane, his daughter, had her blue hair cut in a short bob cut and hung down to about an inch below his shoulder. She also wore the typical shinobi outfit, which included a flak vest that resembled her father's and somewhat twisted around her feminine body. They were both skilled shunin who had been practicing ninjutsu and their own special brand of taijutsu for many years. Being among the hordes of ninja who were vying for the young Uzumaki's blood in order to finish what the fourth started, meant that the two had, regrettably, experienced a significant transformation in their personalities following the nine-tailed fox incident. They spearheaded petitions to repeal the law and have the child put to death for the demon's crimes, even after the third passed his law prohibiting anyone from discussing the incident or informing the younger generation or Uzumaki himself about his condition. In general, the commander no longer held the two in high regard. He knew the difference between a kunai and its storage scroll. Despite his indifferent treatment of the young child, however, child murderers were the one thing he detested more than traitors and overzealous individuals. The commander asked, "So, would either of you like come forward and explain yourselves?" Still standing at attention, the father and daughter said nothing. "Really? You're going to be like this? You're not even going to attempt to take responsibility for disobeying my direct orders?" With an even tone and a neutral expression, Sound stated, "With all due respect, Commander Taro, we acted within the orders you gave us." "Is that so?" Taro asked, seeming surprised. "Are you saying that I explicitly ordered you to blatantly attack the unconscious civilian that was in close proximity to the intruders?" If Taro's question bothered Sound, he did a great job of concealing it. "How do you know that it was us that attacked the civilian in question, Commander? It could have been anyone from the place." "Cut the bullshit, Sound," Taro interrupted. "I saw you with my own eyes. Both you and your daughter deliberately targeting the Uzumaki kid whilst everyone else was focused on attacking the intruders, the real threats to our village." Akane muttered to herself, "Hun, says you." She wasn't quiet enough, apparently. What was that, Shunin? Finally losing patience, Akane glared at Taro. Her father intervened to prevent her from doing something foolish just as she was about to lose her temper. "I believe that what my daughter is trying to say, Commander," Sound responded, "is that we were attempting to take care of all threats to our village, both external and internal." Taro's tone became lethal, suggesting that the two were walking on thin ice, both external and internal. "Explain yourself, Sound." Sound sounded as though he had intended to say something different but had compelled himself to keep his tone polite. "Well, you're aware of the boy's condition, aren't you?" Yes, I was there when the fox demon emerged, and when the third Hokage explained Uzumaki's role in keeping the beast at bay." "Where are you going with this? It's obvious, isn't it? The third may have publicly made that useless law in order to prevent anarchists creating hysteria and chaos amongst the civilians, but it was just an act he was subtly sending his shinobi the order to complete the fourth's work," said Akane. Taro sneered at the kunoichi, his eyes narrowing. "I don't whether to be disgusted or ashamed at the thought that demented sick individuals such as you two managed to be deemed acceptable as shinobi. Your foolish vendetta not only broke our village's most heavily enforced laws, it also jeopardized the entire platoon's safety when the red and blue giant responded to your attacks. Then that should prove that the intruders are demons then, since they protected." "Shut your damn mouths. I don't want to hear another word out either of you. The both of you are disgraces to the very headbands that you wear." "Us? Disgraces? That's rich, coming from someone that sympathizes with that D? Do not test my patience, Shunin Akane. You and your father are already facing the charges of insubordination and attempted murder. Don't make things harder for you two by adding treason to your crimes," yelled Taro. Sound's outburst shocked Taro and his own daughter. "Treason? Treason? If there's anyone guilty of committing treason, it's that senile old fool that calls himself third Hokage," Sound yelled. "Father, please. Don't interrupt me. Daughter, you know it as well as I do that the third has committed the most heinous crime imaginable. When that wretched beast was about to attack our village, we lost thousands upon thousands of our comrades trying to keep that thing at bay until the fourth Hokage arrived. And when the fourth sacrificed himself to weaken the damned fox to where we can finally end its wretched existence once and for all, that wrinkly bastard passed a law decreeing that no harm shall befall on it, and forbade us from warning any of the younger citizens of the danger under the threat of death. What kind of spineless, decrepit fool ignores the deaths of his subordinates, and the suffering of the deceased's families, just so that he can his pet fox to?" A voice brimming with authority exclaimed, "His name is Naruto Uzumaki, and he is a hero beyond comparison for shouldering a burden that no man could ever shoulder, including you Sound." Sound and Akane turned to look at the owner of the voice, but flinched when they saw Hiruzen Sarutobi standing in front of them. A small group of Jonin, both normal and special ranked, stood behind the elderly leader. Some of them, like Kakashi Hitaki, Asuma Sarutobi, and Anko Mitarashi, were recognizable to the pair based solely on appearance. Sound suddenly lost confidence in his ability to defend his convictions, particularly after his superior commander overheard his remarks about the elderly veteran. Lord Hokage, I can explain. Why? Do not insult my intelligence with your pitiful excuses. Sound, you've always been a nuisance. With your constant antagonistic streak, I had thought that you would have gotten over your deluded vendetta over time, but that appears to have been a gross misjudgment on my part, if your recent behavior is any indication. But, my lord, Sound begged, I beg of you to please see sense. We can't let the beast continue to regain its strength if we are to have any peace at mind. That is enough, Sound, It is bad enough that you've used an innocent human being as a scapegoat for your hatred of the fox demon. But the fact that you have manipulated your own daughter into accepting your shameful bigotry shows just how far you have fallen. For the first time since the Hokage's arrival, Akane spoke up and yelled, "You take that back, right now." The girl's words caught in her throat as a sudden concentrated burst of killer intent swept over the two, revealing that despite his advanced age, the third Hokage was still a formidable opponent. "My father is a sincere and honorable man. He didn't need to brainwash me because I already knew the truth, so stop trying to sully some other people's reputation just so that you see." Enko, Asuma, please escort Chunin Sound and Akane back to the village. I think that a visit with Ibiki is in order for these two, after which 3 weeks suspension from active service and mandatory therapeutic sessions with Inoichi will most likely help these two improve their attitudes on certain situations. What? That's not fair. Why? The two Chunin were shocked by the elder leader's violent reaction and decided it would be best if they didn't try their luck any further. Would you and your father prefer a dishonorable discharge and a prison sentence? No? Then don't you dare complain about the severity of your punishment? Now return to the village immediately, before I decide to throw the both of you in prison. Even so, Sound gave Hiruzen a fierce glare just before he and his daughter drove back to the village, Anko and Asuma following closely behind. The old Cage simply let out a sigh at what would probably be yet another disaster for him to handle, on top of the one he had gone to personally investigate in the first place. Both Akane and Sound were renowned shinobi for developing their own taijutsu style and for their high mission success rates. He was saddened by the irrational behavior of such promising ninja. However, there were more pressing issues at hand, and he would handle that situation when the time came. For the first time since the drama started, Sarutobi addressed the commander, saying, "Status report, Commander Taro. Unknown underground tunnel, Leaf Village." The clunks of a wooden cane and the sounds of steady, measured footsteps reverberated throughout the artificial cavern. The walls were lined with lit torches, which gave the tunnels a spooky appearance. Any normal person would be deterred from going down the corridor by these circumstances, but one man was not persuaded. The man was not easily put off by the gloomy atmosphere because he had witnessed numerous atrocities. No, he carefully lurked in the shadows, using them to his advantage to hide his every move as he hunted for anything that he could use to his advantage, in contrast to the idiots who galloped about on the surface, exposing themselves and their weaknesses to both friends and foes. He didn't care that this behavior was characterized by many as villainous and, to some extent, outright treasonous. He had promised to do whatever it took to keep his hometown safe, no matter how many people had to be sacrificed for the sake of the greater good. He would ensure that the Leaf Village thrived and was regarded as the best hidden village in all of the elemental nations. Turning sharply to the left, the man entered a doorway that opened into a private study with a desk and a fully stocked bookshelf. Candlelight illuminated the space next to the desk, but the other half of the room was dark. Unfazed, the man walked to his desk and sat down in the offered chair before gazing into the night. He gave the brief instruction, "Report." A moment later, a shinobi with a short tanto blade, a black cloak, and a white mask with an animal motif came out of the shadows as though he were one of them. A large sealed manila envelope was handed to the seated man by the enigmatic shinobi. "My lord, this is all of the data that we managed to recover from the surveillance cameras situated at Omega Outpost number 31 before the entire area was exposed, and the damage report for the entire outpost. We've had our specialists analyze what we recorded, and managed to create a few profile images of what exactly attacked our village." The newcomer spoke in a monotone voice. The man simply took the envelope and looked at it absently, as though it were a special memento. With his eyes still on the envelope, the man inquired, "And what of the scouting team? Have they returned to base?" The man's hand hesitated just inches from touching the envelope before he said, "Unfortunately, we believe that they have been terminated. Reports from the tracking station say that their beacon seals have faded from the active operatives roster." This was definitely not good news. His organization was supposed to have been formally disbanded permanently, but he was permitted to keep the operatives he had trained as a kind of personal guard. He had to move quickly if those agents had been killed in action. Just nodding, the masked man asked, "Did their tracers list their coordinates before they vanished?" "Send in a salvage team to those coordinates and retrieve their bodies. We don't want anyone loyal to the third to find them and implicate us of our actions." After saying, "It shall be done, my lord," the masked shinobi moved back into the darkness and vanished entirely. Now that he was alone in his quarters, the man quickly tore open the sealed envelope and opened its contents. Across the desk was a black disc that surely held surveillance footage, a scroll listing the outpost's extensive property damage, and a few high-resolution, enhanced photos of the intruder. He put the disc and scroll away to examine at a later date and concentrated on the pictures strewn all over his desk. Three of them immediately caught his attention. The first one showed the heavily armored vehicle form of the intruder firing its cannons at the defenses of the outpost. The second one displayed its bipedal shape, with the building's background serving as a makeshift scale to determine the giant's true size. The man was shown the giant's face and the insignia that adorned its chest in detail by the third and last one, which was a close-up of the behemoth's head and torso based on its immaculate appearance. He could tell at first glance that this creature was not a construct from any rival shinobi village. No engineer his spies were aware of could have created something so intricate. If such a project had been planned, he would have been informed beforehand. The man said out loud, "Just what are you, and where did you come from?" "I, Danzo Shimura, swear that even though you caught us off guard today, we will be ready for your next invasion. Despite everyone's belief that we are extinct, Leaf's foundation will always be there to keep our village from falling apart. We will discover your secrets and use them to make Leaf even better than it was before, and because of my contributions, I will be named Hokage, just as I should have been so many years ago." Medical ward, Autobot headquarters, red alert. How are the two patients doing? As he and the medic stood over the hydraulic lift used for medical operations, which was currently in its lowered position with both human and mini-con laying on top of it, Optimus asked. Red Alert hurried the three Autobots into the emergency room. As soon as they arrived, much to the children's confusion. Optimus had hurriedly instructed Hotshot to stall the three adolescents until he had a better understanding of the situation the two newcomers were in. Unfortunately, the young Autobot was caught off guard, so to speak, and was unsure of how to respond based on Hotshot's initial question about whether or not they knew any humans who could spit fire or throw lightning as a form of an offensive attack. The commander suspected that it would not be long before the children marched into the ward seeking answers. For the benefit of the mini-con, its wounds are not life-threatening. All of the damage was repaired after a short stay in the cryogenic regeneration chamber. Waiting for its central processor to restart is all that's required. I'm more concerned about the human. Using the chamber is obviously out of the question because it would cause more harm than good to his fully organic body. However, more investigation suggests that he won't require any medical support at all. I am unable to comprehend. You stated that the boy would still require further medical care even though his body was healing a little quicker than that of a typical human before we withdrew back to base. You're implying that he doesn't require it now. How can a human being possess such a high rate of healing? Sir, I'm as confused as you are. However, I do believe that the child's quick recovery could be related to his peculiar energy signatures. Signatures of energy? Yes, sir. I assumed the boy would be the more injured of the two patients, so as soon as I got back, I ran a diagnostics program on him. Additionally, if my scanners are working properly, the child is showing two different energy readings. While they both have some traits in common with the mini-cons found in the base, they are also entirely distinct phenomena. According to the initial readings, the boy's body is experiencing a steady but slow flow of energy. For a young creature, this energy is surprisingly abundant, and it is comparable to the readings that a mini-con emits after merging to form a larger Cybertronian. But the second energy reading worries me a little. Its reserves vastly outweigh the initial energy trace, and it appears to be more concentrated around the boy's navel. Furthermore, it resembles raw, unrefined energon deposits quite a bit, albeit more severe and unstable, the medic said. That clarifies Megatron's resolute decision to bring the boy along with the mini-con. I still find it hard to believe that his assertions that people were capable of such destructive power without the use of firearms were accurate. As Optimus's hand lightly touched the injured spot on his back, he added, "If I hadn't seen it with my own optics, I would have simply passed off Megatron's words as one of his mad delusions." The Prime was still shocked by how devastating those attacks were. Indeed, and I wouldn't want to go back to that specific world anytime soon if this boy is a representation of those warriors' immaturity. But given what was brought with the boy, I don't think we'll have a choice in the matter, Red Alert said, pointing to the mini-con on the table before revealing something unexpected to Optimus. A panel at mini-con. That one, where did you find it? He gazed at the item in Red Alert's hand and asked. In the boy's jacket. I discovered it. It was probably the initial cause of Megatron's intense pursuit of the boy. However, this also puts us in a very dangerous situation. There's no way to know how many more mini-cons are out there if these two originated from this unidentified world. I worry that the Decepticons will be encouraged to return there much more frequently given that this world is home to superhuman beings. How mini-cons could be concealed in a place that our planetary sensors haven't been able to detect up to this point is beyond me. We've sent out probes all over this planet, but none of them have ever returned data on a place like the one we just visited. It feels like we're in a completely different planet. However, how can that be possible? Is it possible for such an event to occur, or have we simply discovered a remote human settlement that has been concealed from contemporary society? I wouldn't rule out such an explanation just yet, despite the fact that it does sound rather unrealistic. Remember, sir, that we had the Exodus outfitted with the most sophisticated transwarp systems available to us at the time, including technology that was still in the experimental stage, when we constructed the ship to evacuate the mini-cons from Cybertron. This is only based on what we currently know, but I think that, along with the damage the ship received from the unexpected Decepticon ambush, the trip through the warp gate, and its eventual crash landing on Earth and its moon, may have involved more than just the stasis panels being dispersed throughout the planet. There is a chance that the transwarp system malfunctioned during the planetary impact, opening a warp gate to a dimension that is entirely distinct from the one we are currently in. However, as previously stated, this is merely a hypothesis, backed by the idea of infinite parallel universes. When they regain consciousness, the mini-con or the boy will probably provide us with more specific answers. Optimus sighed and kept his eyes on the lift, saying, "Let's just hope they wake up soon." Then the automatic door opened, bringing the two Autobots' attention to the new arrivals, and if they had just kept their eyes on the occupied lift for a second longer, they would have noticed the mini-con's optics flicker. "Hey, red alert, Optimus, are you guys really fighting superheroes?" Carlos asked, his voice full of excitement, as soon as he entered the room. "Carlos, you must ask permission before entering this place." Hotshot ran in shortly after, looking very embarrassed, and Alexis exclaimed as she ran after her friend, Rad, and the Street Action mini-con team. "I apologize, Optimus," he started, but the children were very curious about what had transpired during our most recent expedition and when mini-cons were involved. They particularly disliked being kept in the dark. I did my best to explain the circumstances, but it seemed to make matters worse, and then It's all right, Hotshot. Optimus was interrupted. "I was planning on telling the children everything anyways, after I made sure that our two guests weren't in any immediate danger." "Optimus, we sincerely apologize if we..." "Whoa, what happened to your back, Optimus?" "It would have been more tactful if I had had the damage repaired much sooner," said Rad, as he finally saw the burn and blast damage that scarred the Autobots' backs. Normally bright red plating. His exclamation only served to alert Alexis and Carlos of the injury as well. Optimus mentally chastised himself for not concealing his injuries better so as not to upset the three humans. "Optimus, are you okay?" "Oh my god," with her hands over her mouth in disbelief, Alexis asked. "Were you harmed by those Decepti creeps?" Carlos growled. The Prime reassured them, "I'm fine, you three. The injury hurts a little, but it's nothing serious." "Regarding your inquiry, Carlos, the Decepticons weren't involved this time. It was the locals who gave me this wound. They seem to be very territorial." "Locals? Hold on a second." Hotshot had previously asked us if people could use lightning and fire attacks without the aid of technology. Are you implying that without the use of missiles or machine guns, humans were able to drive you three away? Carlos inquired, his enthusiasm gradually erupting. "Yes, Carlos, before we retreated, we were ambushed by humans that could utilize energy-based attacks that were dependent on focused fire, earth, and lightning." Optimus, who had some experience with the boy's enthusiasm, felt no harm in responding to the boy's question. Then Rad whispered, "I can't say that I've ever heard of anything like that before, except in comic books. Did these humans have any distinguishing traits? For example, did they wear a uniform or did they use any distinguishing weapons? That could help us figure out exactly who you met. And whether or not they pose a threat to your cover," said Alexis. "Well, Red Alert started. The group was made up of both adult male and female humans based on what we observed from the battalion that attacked us. In addition to their energy attacks, they employed explosives that appeared to be tiny slips of paper combined with tiny throwing knives. Although the warriors' clothing varied slightly from person to person, most of them wore green utility vests. They were also all wearing a headband made of cloth with a metal plate fastened to it. There was a symbol of some kind engraved on the plate itself." Hotshot pointed to the boy lying on the lift and said, "It kind of looks like the one that kid is wearing." He was referring to the headband that was worn on his head. In an attempt to catch a glimpse, the children and their mini-con partners crowded to the elevator. Before his eyes widened in sudden recognition, Carlos said, "Huh, it looks like some sort of spiraling leaf. Hold on just a second, throwing knives, paper bombs, headbands. You guys fought against ninja?" "No, scratch that, super-powered ninjas. That's got to be the only explanation." After hearing his friend's digressions about super ninja multiple times, Rad asked, his face unperturbed, "Ninjas? Really, Carlos?" "Ah, come on, Rad, don't give me that look." Actually, Carlos isn't too far off from describing our attackers, even though there are some vast differences between the ninja that your historical records depict and the battalion that we encountered. The similarities were uncanny to say the least. "Ha! I knew it," exclaimed Carlos with a sense of triumph. "Okay, so you three were attacked by ninjas, but if that's the case, then why did you bring one of them back to the base?" He could be a scout sent in by the enemy to infiltrate our defenses, and look for any weaknesses that his people can exploit. I kind of find that hard to believe, Alexis, unless you count being hounded by Megatron and then attacked by your own kind as some sort of elaborate cover story, replied Hot Shot. Alexis's prepared counter died in her throat, leaving her unable to speak. Carlos and Rad also appeared shocked, unsure of how to interpret the near fatal of someone their age. Rad thought out loud, why would someone try to kill a kid? Red Alert responded, that's what we were hoping to find out, once the boy wakes up. Rad just nodded, choosing to keep quiet because he wasn't sure how he felt about the circumstances, that is, until he noticed Carlos approaching the enigmatic child slowly. As Rad yelled, "Hey, Carlos, what do you think you're doing?" Alexis was startled out of her daze, but Carlos interrupted her before she could chastise the Hispanic teenager. But as Carlos continued to approach the blonde slowly, he never considered paying more attention to the mini-con that was lying next to the boy, and as a result, he missed the small robot's optics flickering on. Calm down, Rad, I'm just looking to see if this dude's got any ID on him or something. That way, we'd at least know the guy's name, and if I happen across any ninja weapons on his person, I'll just hang on to them until he wakes up, since Alexis is so certain that this guy's dangerous. Everything happened so quickly. 1 second Carlos was reaching for the blonde boy, and the next he was flung backwards when a hard object struck his solar plexus with unfathomable force. The child was forced to land hard on his back, coughing and gasping as the air was forced out of his lungs. The sight before him, however, unpleasantly surprised him as he was able to restore normal breathing. The mini-con that had been lying next to the kid had now appeared in front of him. He had assumed it was in the same condition as the boy because it had been lying down on the lift earlier, in contrast to Grinder. Carlos could see that this new mini-con was better suited for fighting, and he now regretted not paying more attention to it. Furthermore, it was not in a pleasant mood based on its posture. I don't know how you are, but if you think that I'm just going to let you kick my friend when he's down, then you've got another thing coming," said the tiny robot. A grip, trigger guard, and trigger folded out of the center of the mini-con's back. As it reached behind it, the grip fell into its hand as a long, rectangular section jettisoned from the center of its back. Carlos trembled in terror as he heard the assault rifle hum to life and saw its barrel glow with a ready shot as the tiny robot suddenly jerked and leveled the newly exposed weapon at his head. Except for the street action team, everyone was rendered speechless by the abrupt action. They jumped into the air, merging into Perceptor in midair, and landed in front of the weapon-wielding jetbot, adopting a fighting stance and shielding the human when they noticed that the newest mini-con was holding Carlos at gunpoint. Rad and Alexis rushed to the center of the impending battlefield to try to stop the would-be fighters because they didn't want the situation to turn into a fight to the death. Alexis tried to calm Perceptor by saying, "Wait, stop, please. You two don't need to fight each other, we're all on the same side here." Instead, Rad, holding the gun in front of the mini-con, continued, "This is all just one big misunderstanding. If we all just take a second to calm down and talk to each other, we can avoid this conflict altogether." The little bot didn't seem to be listening to him, so he wasn't sure why he felt it was a good idea to stand in front of the potentially murderous mini-con. A voice boomed from above the scene, "Everyone, please settle down, there's no need for violence." The tiny robot appeared to be startled out of its reverie by that, turning its head to the location where the voice was heard and gaping at the identity of the voice's owner. "Oh, Optimus Prime? You and your friend are safe. Neither of you will suffer any harm," the Prime Minister concluded in a calming tone. The mini-con chose to look back in Carlos' general direction without saying anything. "I assure you that the human child meant no ill will towards your friend. He was just curious as to where the two of you came from. I'm sure that you have a few questions that you want answered, but we need to address this situation calmly. If any progress is to be made now, if you would kindly lower your weapon, we can answer each other's questions peacefully," he continued. The mini-con did not move, its eyes still fixed on Carlos. Because they were afraid of starting a terrible chain of violent events, no one dared to move. The mini-con eventually relaxed its stance and put its rifle back on its back as the silence grew more and more intolerable. When Perceptor noticed that the newcomer had stepped aside, he disengaged and changed back into his individual mini-con parts, and Grinder hurried over to Carlos' side right away in order to avoid cornering the mini-con. Rad chose to give it more room by backing away. Prime went on, "If it's okay with you, may I ask what your name is?" The mini-con assumed the stance of a soldier standing at attention as it faced Optimus. The mini-con declared, "Agent Spitfire, last surviving member of the Special Operatives team." The human children were quick to notice the newcomer's appearance, and High Wire, Grinder, and Shershak all appeared surprised. "Shershak, what's wrong? Were you acquainted with him on Cybertron?" Alexis inquired. The Scooter Mini-Con responded, "Not personally, but we have heard of his team's exploits when we were still fighting in the Great War." The Special Operatives team gained notoriety for carrying out missions that were deemed suicide attempts with little chance of success. They resembled the Autobots' wreckers in certain ways, but they were smaller and had a better chance of surviving. Unfortunately, things went south when they and 3 other Minicon teams W. High Wire. High Wire looked at Grinder, who simply shook his head, and the two stared at each other without saying anything, but High Wire nodded his head, as if to indicate that he understood the underlying message that Grinder was trying to convey to him. High Wire only needed to glance at Spitfire and see his shaking fists to realize that he had almost strayed into Spitfire's personal affairs. "Sorry, what I meant to say was, until one of their missions was compromised, and the 2 original Special Ops members were destroyed in the line of duty." High Wire sighed. "Some of us thought that your spark had extinguished in the OR. It was as if you had simply vanished," Grinder added. "We knew that an Autobot recon team managed to recover you and the others, but we never heard word of you returning to the front lines. Just wondering what happened to you. If that's okay, your disappearance severely damaged our Minicon's morale because you were once regarded as one of our most skilled fighters." Unaware that his inaction since that failed mission had had such a detrimental effect on his race, Spitfire grimaced inwardly, feeling even more ashamed of his acrophobia than before, unable to even begin to explain his crippling fear of heights without coming across as pitiful. Fortunately, a sound of groaning came from behind him before he could say anything as the human started to stir, and Spitfire hurried back to where the prone boy was lying, kneeling at his side. "What the hell happened?" "Ooor," murmured the blonde, as he slowly tried to sit up, with Spitfire gently assisting him. The mini-jet bot had one of his hands covering the boy's still closed eyes. "Last thing I remember was Megatron." The human's anxiety was exacerbated when Spitfire restrained the boy as he attempted to leap to his feet. Spitfire calmly remarked, "It's okay, Naruto, we're safe now." The now named Naruto halted his movement right away. "Spitfire. Why are you hiding my eyes, and where are we?" he inquired. "We were both unconscious when we were fortunate enough to be saved from Megatron's forces. We're at the Autobots' home base right now, so you don't need to worry about the cons being around for very long." "What? Autonomous robots? More robots like Clawhead and his henchmen?" "Hey, those Decepti creeps are nothing like the Autobots," Carlos yelled. "Hold on a second, was that a human? Are human children being kidnapped by these Autobots for scientific purposes? Spitfire, how is that any different from those Decepticons?" "No. These children are not being held here against their will, I assure you, and these bots have a lot of explaining to do if they are." Spitfire scolded Carlos for inadvertently exacerbating Naruto's panic. "Young man, I promise you that nobody is being held here against their will and that you are not in any danger. In an attempt to sound as composed as possible, Optimus said, "We mean you no harm." "Who is that? Who is it?" Naruto yelled. "That's the Autobots commander, Optimus Prime. He's..." "Well, this is getting out of hand. I want you to swear to me that you won't have a panic attack before I reveal your eyes. Naruto, you must maintain your composure. Could you please do that for me?" "Yeah, absolutely, as long as I can see with my own eyes again," said Naruto, who was still unsure of how to handle his current predicament. Having his eyes covered after waking from unconsciousness and then learning that he was in an unfamiliar environment was not a pleasant feeling, so when he felt the cool sensation of Spitfire's hand leave his face, his eyes instantly opened to take in as much of his surroundings as he could. The sudden burst of bright light temporarily blinded him, but when his vision returned, he was confronted by a sight the young shinobi had never anticipated. 3 human civilian children, 2 boys and 1 girl. And 3 additional robots the same size as the small jet bot. Although Spitfire had grown accustomed to seeing aliens in the form of his Minicon friend, it was still unexpected to see more of Spitfire's kind in person. But when Naruto gazed upon the 3 hulking giants that stood further back, he involuntarily stepped back in shock. There was one that was predominantly yellow and burnt orange, with gray forearms and fists, a dark gray visor that rested on its head, and strange markings that ran underneath its blue eyes. Another one had blue limbs, predominantly white armor with red stripes, a red cylindrical device in place of its left hand, and a red visor in place of its eyes. But it was the giant in between the other 2 that really caught Naruto's attention. It stood a good foot taller than the other giants, its larger frame giving off an air of strength and wisdom. The red and blue armor that composed most of its body was full of scuffs and scratches that were most likely from countless battles. The blue head had 2 big antennae-shaped objects jutting behind him, and a silver faceplate that covered its mouth. Its glowing yellow eyes had a hypnotic quality to them as they seemed to draw Naruto into them, yet they held no malice like Megatron's did. "All right, I believe it's time for some introductions." With trepidation, Naruto stood up and looked from one enormous robot to another. And maybe an explanation if that's not too much trouble, he said. The red and blue giant introduced himself as Optimus Prime and explained that they were self-governing robotic beings from the planet Cybertron. The giant with the red visor continued, but we prefer the term Autobots, for short, but we have also been called Transformers. Optimus pointed to the robot wearing white armor and missing a hand, saying, "To my left is Red Alert, our medical officer." Red Alert simply nodded courteously at the boy. "And to my right is Hot Shot, one of the many seasoned soldiers that make up the Autobot army." Hot Shot waved briefly and said, "Hey, how's it going?" "So then, you're the leader of this Autobot army, right?" replied Naruto. "Yes, that's correct." Naruto then looked around the room at the other people. "And if this is a military base, then why are there civilians involved in your operations, Optimus?" "Hey, who do you think you are, calling us civilians? We've been helping the Autobots and Minicons longer than you have." Carlos yelled. Alexis and Rad were prepared to step in if their friend did something hasty. While we normally don't allow neutral species to become involved in Cybertronian matters, especially one as severe as the Great War, but it was thanks to Rad, Carlos, and Alexis that the first 3 Minicons were kept safe from the Decepticons long enough for us to intervene. Naruto's anxiety grew as he watched the 3 Autobots look at one another. "What exactly is this Great War? And why did you decide to bring the elemental nations into it?" he demanded. Hotshot said, "It's kind of a long story, kid. Well, I'm not going anywhere, and I've got plenty of time on my hands, so why not try me?" Optimus moved forward, lifting the hydraulic lift until he could see the Minicons and humans. "Our home planet, Cybertron, was once a power empire, peaceful and just. But like all empires, our government soon fell prey to greed and corruption, and soon a massive gap between our planet's social classes emerged as living conditions for the Commonwealth continued to deteriorate. More and more Cybertronians began to riot against the government at first. They were disorganized, and were easily dealt with the government's elite guard, but all of that changed when Megatron made himself known." "Megatron?" Naruto inquired. Once a former Energon miner in one of Cybertron's many mines, Megatron became notorious as a gladiator in the underground pit fights that were held in the city-state, Kaon. As Megatron's popularity grew with each victory, he began to attract the attention of several Cybertronians that shared his resentment for the corruption that ran rampant throughout the planet. Megatron used this to his advantage to amass a large army, loyal only to him and ideals. At first, Megatron wanted to use this large following to change Cybertron for the better, to make sure that each Cybertronian was treated equally. But like Cybertron, Megatron too became corrupt through the passage time. Gon was the advocate for a free and equal society, and in his place was a cruel, power-hungry, sadistic tyrant who was dead set on conquering Cybertron, and then the entire universe. His personal army, the Decepticons, first made their presence known when they attacked and killed several members of the Senate, after which, Megatron led his followers on a violent and bloody rampage, taking over several city-states to use as strongholds for their rapidly growing army in response to Megatron's campaign. We Autobots banded together and fought back against the Decepticons, thus starting the Great War. The war was difficult, and with every battle, the number of casualties on both sides increased to unimaginable proportions. Cybertron itself was literally split in two by the intensity of the battle. Due to the planet's actual division into 2 distinct regions, the conflict stalled to the point where both armies were unable to break the impasse. The war only became more significant after the Minicons were discovered. The full-sized Cybertronians could be combined with these smaller Transformers to increase their strength, speed, or even to reveal new weapons concealed inside our bodies that we would not typically be able to use. Why would using these weapons require a Minicon? Hold on a second, were you unable to activate them on your own? Naruto interrupted. Normally, we can, but employing these weapons in battle would use up too much of our energy because they are incorporated into our internal systems. The weapon's potential firepower would also be significantly reduced because we have to carefully control how much energy we use. However, if Minicon fused with one of us, they could supply the energy required to activate the weapon and assist in controlling and removing the strain of powering them, leading to a significantly higher rate of efficiency, Red Alert explained. Prime concurred, saying, "Quite right." However, despite the Minicon's numerous beneficial contributions to the war, there were also a number of disadvantages. Our already devastated world was further harmed when our more devastating integrated weapons were introduced, causing Cybertron to experience catastrophic levels of destruction. Furthermore, the Minicons were treated far worse than slaves by the Decepticons, who began to see them as nothing more than weapons rather than sentient robots. As a result, They were forced to combine with their soldiers and improve their fighting skills to the point where they were placed in stasis lock. To make matters worse, Megatron had his scientists conduct live tests on mini-cons to determine how best to maximize the abilities of his soldiers in order to force them to give the Decepticons their best effort despite the possibility of their entire system failing. This typically required completely disabling their internal fail-safe mechanisms despite the efforts of our top medics. Many of the mini-cons that we liberated had chronic injuries that were incurable. Naruto's eyes widened in shock, not used to hearing about such atrocities as the one that was committed on his friend's fellow kinsman. He was sick to his core to learn that an entire race had been reduced to mere objects and had experienced horrors like live experimentation. He had been treated worse than any criminal in his village, but to be viewed as a weapon? As someone whose life could have been so easily discarded once deemed useless? That was a pretty unsettling thought. Something that he wouldn't wish upon anyone, not even his enemies. He glanced to his left and saw similar looks of shock and horror, suggesting that the three children were unaware of the struggles the mini-cons faced back on Cybertron. The mini-cons contacted us and begged for our assistance in escaping Cybertron after realizing that their continued presence would only make the war worse. After a great deal of planning and a few almost suicide missions, we managed to capture all the mini-cons and construct a ship that could carry them far away. However, the Decepticons tried to retake the mini-cons by ambushing us on the day they were supposed to evacuate. We fought them to give our young friends enough time to get out through the warp gate, but as they were ready to enter the gate, their transwarp systems malfunctioned due to the damage to their ship. Your solar system turned out to be their ultimate destination. The Exodus crashed, first shattering when it struck your moon and then landing on ancient Earth as a result of the damage finally taking a toll on the ship. The mini-cons were discarded worldwide by the Exodus due to the impact of the landing and the structural harm caused by the moon, where they remained in stasis for millions of years. The Street Action Team was discovered by Rad, Carlos, and Alexis by chance when they happened upon the wreckage of the Exodus. Both the Autobots and the Decepticons sent soldiers to Earth as a result of the team's reawakening. One faction wanted to reclaim them for use as weapons, while the other faction wanted to protect them. And just how long has this civil war been going on? Naruto looked at the Autobot commander, fearing the question he was about to ask. Optimus was hesitant to reveal the terrible truth about Cybertron to the blonde, but he knew that Naruto and the first three kids deserved to know the truth after everything they had been through at Megatron's hands. Optimus replied solemnly, "In your time, close to about 4 million years." Naruto remained silent, trying to make sense of what he had just learned. He had studied the 3 ninja world wars in the academy, and he knew that they had lasted for a number of years, leaving the world scarred and mutilated when they were over. But now they all seemed like insignificant quarrels in comparison to the planet-scale civil war on Cybertron that had been going on since before humans ever existed. It was simply too much to imagine that an entire civilization, generation after generation, had been destroyed by unrelenting conflict. With no apparent end in sight, Naruto looked back at the 3 civilian children, noting the solemn and slightly horrified expressions on their faces, which readily revealed to him that they had been unaware of the severity of Cybertron's war until now. "Optimus, where exactly are we in regard to the Leaf Village?" he asked, recalling something Optimus had said earlier, or rather, what he didn't say after everything that transpired. "I believe it would be best if I told Old Man Hokage that Spitfire and I were okay." The Autobots exchanged anxious looks before responding to the blonde's query. "Basic countries? Where is that in Japan?" Carlos inquired. "And what exactly is the purpose of a Hogi?" Rad added. "Hokage, the strongest and most esteemed ninja in the Land of Fire. Hokage, the head of the village hidden in the leaves? Wa Land of Fire. A secret leaf? You're completely nonsensical. Where in the world are these places?" Alexis asked. "I've never heard of such names being used for any region of Japan." "What are you talking about? Japan? What on earth is that?" Optimus brought the 4 teenagers' attention to himself by interrupting. "Naruto, there's something that you need to know. We had some difficulties before we found you in Spitfire. You see, we had picked up a mini-con homing beacon earlier this week, but it mysteriously disappeared a few seconds after it appeared. Despite our best efforts, we were unable to draw any firm conclusions from the data we were given. Only after we found the second mini-con did we discover." "The mini-con?" exclaimed Naruto, unzipping his jacket only to find that the storage panel was no longer tucked behind it, much to his dismay. "Oh, crap. Don't tell me that Megatron managed to get it after everything we went through." Red Alert held up the panel for the ninja to see and said, "It's okay. The mini-con is safe and sound. I just moved it so that I could check to see if you were injured." Naruto let out a breath of relief. Then, sheepishly scratching the back of his head at an unseen itch, he turned back to the Autobot commander. "Sorry about that, Optimus, you were saying? Yes, well, once our sensors managed to pick up the second Mini-Con's beacon, we encountered similar difficulties in locking onto its coordinates. It took us a while to finally pinpoint the exact location, which is why it took so long for us to intervene on Megatron. But another factor in our delayed reaction time was the location itself. You see, even though we have been on Earth for a short while, we had already managed to map out the entire planet to a degree that we were familiar with just about every major country in this world, as well as learn a brief history of a few of the civilizations that once existed on this planet. Yet, we have never came across a human settlement quite like yours, and when we compared the initial images of your village to that of the cities we've seen already, we saw that your home shared no similarities with the other cities that we've observed. The buildings and structures simply did not match with what we have seen from our probes. The dread that had been eating away at the pit of his stomach suddenly came back to haunt the blonde. Naruto was not particularly pleased with what he was hearing, despite the fact that he was only able to understand fragments of Optimus' explanation. Look, Optimus, I appreciate you telling me the truth and everything, but could you please just get to the main point? I've had a rough day, and I'd prefer that you tell me what you're trying to say without beating around the bush, replied Naruto. For a moment, Optimus said nothing, as though he was genuinely unwilling to respond to the boy's inquiry. What I'm saying, Naruto, is that your village hidden in the leaves doesn't exist, at least in our dimension.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.